Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the inaugural Holomedicine Association Summit. I'm Ken Wei, a data scientist at NUHS Singapore, and I'm honored to be the moderator for the morning session. Before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone that the summit is being recorded and that the recording will be made available on the Holomedicine Association website in the near future. This summit is organized in conjunction with the Singapore Healthcare AI Datathon and Expo. Before we begin with today's program, let us take a look at this video produced by Singapore's National University Hospital.
Hello?
Hi, Dr. Cheryl. I have a complex liver transplant case that I think may require a transfer to your hospital. Can we have a discussion, please?
Yes, sure. Let's connect to your lens.
Our world can seem smaller than it really is. In these changing times, it's easy to feel more disconnected from each other than ever. But with brilliant new technology, there is a way to bridge the gap. There is so much more beyond what we can see. There is so much more beyond what's right in front of us.
Hi, Dr. Tan. Good to see you. How can I help?
Glad to see you again. I have a living donor liver transplant case, and I've been speaking to both the donor and recipient. The recipient anatomy seems quite complex. Let me show you the scan.
Every day, the possibilities grow more and more endless, and people don't need to feel so far away. With groundbreaking innovation and the power of data, we can make better predictions, prescribe safer treatment, and give our patients better care than ever before. Building bridges where there is no clear path ahead. Suddenly, we are in control, and the future isn't so frightening. Suddenly, we transcend the distance between us, and we can do so much more together. Opportunity is at our fingertips because the future of healthcare is here.
Now, I'd like to invite Dr. Gao Yujia, Vice Chairman and Director of Medicine, Science and Technology of the Holomedicine Association, to start the summit with a welcome address. Dr. Gao, please.
Thank you, Ken Wei. First of all, a very good morning to everyone, all the panelists who will be joining us today, as well as the attendees. So the Holomedicine Association has been founded earlier this year by about 60 medical professionals and experts in mixed and extended reality, artificial intelligence, and of course, the Internet of Things. The objective of the association is really to promote the use of mixed and extended reality in medicine, while setting standards for safety, promoting harmonized public policies, addressing privacy concerns, creating funding streams, and of course, supporting the development of medical and scientific evidence. As a young association, we are very happy to be able to share medical and scientific progress during this inaugural meeting. And you will see that the use of this very exciting technology is indeed a reality in many hospitals across the globe. So to kick off the summit today, I have the pleasure of introducing Ms. Andrea Della Mattia. So Ms. Delamatia is the president of Asia Pacific for Microsoft, and she is responsible for leading Microsoft's overall business, accelerating the digital transformation journeys of customers and partners, and driving Microsoft's mission of empowering every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. She has more than 25 years of experience in the technology sector and is very passionate about helping customers and partners leverage technology to drive business outcomes. And of course, she firmly believes that when we are inclusive, everyone wins. Ms. Delamatia, please.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me to speak with you at the Holomedicine Summit today. My name is Andrea, and I'm the president of Microsoft Asia Pacific. Before we begin, though, please join me in thanking the teams that brought this event to life. It really does take a village to make a 2-day, 3-time zone event happen. So congratulations and thank you to everyone who helped contribute. Look, it's fair to say, even before the pandemic, healthcare organizations were accelerating technology adoption. We've seen a rapidly growing number of healthcare organizations not only deploy innovative technologies, but also embark on a journey to develop their own digital capabilities. In fact, at the start of the pandemic, healthcare organizations, hospitals, and others on the front lines of the COVID-19 response needed to have the ability to quickly triage patients, respond to inquiries, provide up-to-date outbreak information, manage resources, and more. And at Microsoft, our focus has been on using technology and data to help healthcare providers respond and public healthcare authorities make informed and effective decisions. So I thought I might share a couple of examples for you today, how this really comes to life. Starting with the Health Bot. We've been offering the Healthcare Bot service to organizations on the front lines, and this helps provide individualized experiences at scale, which enables people to self-report symptoms and exposure risk to qualified health professionals. And the bot service had millions of user sessions during COVID-19. And customers, including the Center for Disease Control, Providence, Walgreens, Virginia Mason Health System, and Novan Health were just a few. And over in China, a telemedicine platform was pushed to go live in just 10 days, so that patients in remote areas and others unable to visit a medical center in person were able to access quality healthcare. And early in the pandemic, at the height of uncertainty, we also helped transform business processes and accelerated modernization with Veterans Affairs through a tracking dashboard that allowed them to track and react to active COVID-19 cases amongst veterans, as well as current bed space at VA hospitals. The VA relies on a series of cloud-based dashboards built with Microsoft's Power BI, Bing Maps platform, and also Azure App Service. And the dashboards offer a first-hand view of near real-time data across the largest integrated healthcare organization in America, including patient information, system capacity, staffing, and inventory. And look, I share these examples with you today to demonstrate that we're seeing computing becoming distributed and embedded in the real world. And we're moving from digital transformation, which traditionally you would have heard us speaking about, to a period of digital acceleration. And we're moving from a mobile and cloud era to an era of ubiquitous computing and ambient intelligence. And it's an era that will experience more digitization over the next 10 years than we've experienced over the past 40 years. IDC actually predicts that organizations will spend 6.8 trillion on digital transformation by 2023. And the healthcare industry, well, they're expected to spend more than 256 billion on technology. As you may have heard Satya Nadella, our CEO, said, we need to build our own digital capabilities on top of the technology that we've adopted, because every company is a software company and every company is a digital organization. And with no precedent to inform healthcare leaders on a pandemic recovery of this magnitude, our organization is helping healthcare organizations navigate the future through innovation and technology. We've also teamed up with GE to remotely monitor ICU patients so medical professionals can manage more people with fewer resources. And it has triple benefits. First, improving workforce efficiency. Secondly, decreasing the need to use scarce PPE. And most importantly, decreasing infections. And in India, the largest provider of cancer care, Healthcare Global, responded by using Microsoft Teams to carry out virtual consultations. And by doing so, they've demonstrated how technology can make cancer care more accessible and more affordable, even for patients from abroad. Meanwhile, HoloLens, the untethered mixed reality headset, is taking virtual and remote consultations to the next level. For example, this technology means patients on remote islands in Japan can receive real-time virtual specialized medical care from the Nagasaki University Rheumatoid Arthritis Remote Medical System. And in Taiwan, a similar system is in place. Their general practitioners and nurses are using HoloLens during house calls in tandem with specialist physicians miles away. And this effectively upgrades a standard house call to a specialist consultation. And over in Australia, New South Wales Health Pathology use Microsoft Azure to quickly ingest data from 5 different government pathology systems, whilst meeting the security and compliance posture required when working with sensitive public health data. Technology and innovation have allowed us to pool information together, to draw insights, and frankly, to become more proactive. We collaborate with our customers to understand what they want to accomplish, the challenges they need to overcome, and how they want to advance their industry. And look, the past year has proven that organizations, both big and small, can be adaptable and resilient. And in response, we've accelerated our work to support and co-innovate with customers and partners. The pandemic has permanently reshaped our healthcare systems for the better. And we've seen 10 years worth of transformation just in the span of 8 months. And these new tools and ways of operating are here to stay. And the investments healthcare organizations are making now will allow them to build resilience as we shift towards a new normal and quickly scale for additional waves of COVID-19 and future challenges. So together with our healthcare customers, we're harnessing this progress in unison with new learnings to make structural changes and to reimagine the future of healthcare operations and delivery. And it's fair to say this year, every company will learn to become a healthcare company, as safeguarding employees and customers becomes a core requirement of doing business. And as companies cautiously look to return to the workplace, and I'm sure you've all heard a lot of conversation, there's a lot of research now on hybrid work, supporting the mental health of workers as they balance home, family, and work responsibilities, and assessing whether their teams are overworked or taking the right precautions to safeguard their health, well, that's going to become a priority. And in fact, we're already seeing that it is. And once again, technology will play its part in mitigating these dangers with data-driven insights, like Microsoft Viva, giving individuals, managers, and leaders personalized and actionable privacy-protected insights that help everyone in an organization thrive. And this is even more critical at a time when over 30% of workers say the pandemic has increased their sense of burnout. So it's never been more important to help people unplug and make the most of their scarcest resource, which of course is their time. So now let's take a look at what's next. The connection between patients, care teams, and data has been fundamental to delivering the best possible care and outcomes. And with the world becoming a computer, and as digital and physical worlds come together, the metaverse enables us to embed computing into the real world, and also to embed the real world into computing, bringing real presence to any digital space. And when we talk about the metaverse, we're describing both a new platform and a new application type, like how we talked about the web and websites back in the early 90s. And the connection between patients, care teams, and data has been fundamental to delivering the best possible care and outcomes. But human presence is, of course, the ultimate connection. When you and I can have a meeting where we're all present together without being physically present, that's the next breakthrough, just like today. And we're approaching this thoughtfully because we've learned from similar transitions in the past. The metaverse isn't just transforming how we see the world, it's also transforming how all of us actively participate in it. Patients are actively seeking digital tools that allow them to be seen by their health provider without leaving their homes. In fact, almost 80% of people who used telehealth during COVID-19 reported patient satisfaction, and more than 70% expect to access virtual care post the pandemic. And community doctors like Dr. Chen Chao-Xin in Taiwan often make house calls to serve the needs of older people and people with disabilities, as he is amongst a growing number of physicians using Microsoft HoloLens to take this medical service to the next level. We're also doing incredible work with NUHS, where they're using HoloLens in surgery. And we're seeing more health organizations investing in new modalities of care, like virtual visits and remote patient monitoring. And these options help their patients remain proactive in their care. And what's most important is that we can bring our humanity with us and choose how we want to experience this world and who we want to interact with. Equally important are our digital natives. And these are the startups and the unicorns that you've all heard about, disrupting many industries. And with the rise of digital creators in every organization, it means developers increasingly will drive and influence every business process and function across every organization. And over the past 2 years, the number of developers at non-tech companies has actually outpaced the number of developers at tech companies. And 500 million apps are going to be built in the next 5 years. That's more than all the apps built in the last 40 years. And independent software vendors, ISVs, across Asia Pacific, are responsible for a large majority of software applications built on third-party platforms and are the biggest catalysts for growth in cloud adoption right here in this region. Look, we've an unmatched global ecosystem of trusted partners, and we work with leading ISVs and systems integrators, so our customers have the complete solutions they need to address their unique business challenges. In Korea, for example, Lunit developed Insight CXR, an artificial intelligence software built on Azure, where algorithms have been trained to read X-rays and originally could detect signs of 10 major chest diseases, including cancers, with an accuracy rate of between 97 to 99%. And when the pandemic struck, the developers quickly adapted to also scan for signs of COVID-19, including pneumonia, which is often present in infected patients. Imagine this, halfway across the world, Lunit Insight CXR has also been installed at Prevent Senior, one of the largest hospital networks in Brazil. At Microsoft, we're also focused on trust and security, helping to protect patients' most valuable health information and supporting our customers' compliance requirements. Our ambition is not only to become a healthcare provider partner, but rather to work with those on the front lines to improve the care delivery system. Customer data belongs to our customers, not us. We work with organizations, we partner with organizations to help them harness the data to build the predictive and analytical power required for their own competitive advantage. And we're the only cloud platform with cloud capabilities that ingest, enrich, and normalize structured, unstructured IOMT and medical imaging FHIR data using FHIR and DICOM standards to create longitudinal records of the patient. And together with our healthcare customers, we're harnessing this progress and any new learnings to make structural changes and reimagining the future of healthcare operations and delivery. And finally, to close, our economy and our society are undergoing a sea change of digitization across every industry, every sector, and every country. And we're emerging into a new era where you and the valuable work you do and your organizations will be more necessary than ever, with data, cloud, and AI helping us to accelerate into this brave new world. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Della Mattia, for the insightful sharing on how Microsoft is actively supporting the development of digital medical technologies. Next up, let us invite Dr. Gao, who is also the program lead for the Holomedicine program at the National University Health Systems in Singapore, to share about NUH's progress in adopting Holomedicine technology.
Thanks, Kevin, and thanks, Ms. Della Mattia, for such a wonderful talk. So I'm just going to share my screen now. Okay, great. Once again, good morning, everyone. I'll be giving a short talk today about the NUHS Holomedicine program and how we are trying to use mixed reality technology as a platform for the future of integrated medicine. So a little bit about myself. I'm an associate consultant at the National University Hospital, and I specialize in hepatobiliary surgery as well as liver transplant. And I'm also the the vice chairman of the Holomedicine Association. These are my disclosures. And just a disclaimer that everything that you see during this presentation represents research and development work that is in progress, and all the studies that we conduct under this program have been approved by the relevant ethical review boards. So just a little bit of history about extended reality and its use in healthcare. It first started out with virtual reality, and actually this dates all the way back to the 1960s when we first explored the use of VR technology. For the healthcare sector, it really began in the 90s when there was initial use of VR in experimental treatment in mental health, training and education, as well as some limited use in three-dimensional visualization of patient scans. So this moved on to augmented reality in the 2000s, and we are all very familiar with the Google Glass, as well as some of the applications on the iPads or Surface tablets, where we can see a information overlay on the real world that is projected in front of us. And this has been around for quite some time, and we have been trying to use this in the medical sector as well. But there have been quite a number of shortcomings in both virtual reality and augmented reality, which has sort of prevented its more widespread use and adoption across the healthcare community. So what is the real difference between virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality? So virtual reality encompasses the user in a fully enclosed environment. Whatever they see is completely computer generated, and there's very limited interaction with the outside world. And one of the biggest issues with VR headsets is that a lot of users complain about motion sickness and nausea after a relatively short period of use. For augmented reality, they tried to circumvent some of these shortcomings of VR, and now we're actually able to see the physical world around us and have an information overlay that we can have some interaction with. But the main disadvantage with augmented reality is that the information overlay that we see is still in 2-dimension. We don't actually have the capability to have a 3-dimensional overlay for augmented reality. So what mixed reality tried to do is to incorporate the advantages of both VR and AR while trying to solve some of the disadvantages. And one of the biggest one of the biggest developments in mixed reality is that the sensors on the MR devices can actually perceive the world around us in 3-dimension, exactly like how a human would perceive it. And we can see how this will be of much benefit in the healthcare industry. So at NUHS Holomedicine program, what we're trying to do is to leverage on the mixed reality technology to enhance our clinical capabilities, to improve the clinician's experience when it comes to treating patients. And of course, at the end of the day, the whole aim is to try and improve patient outcomes. So we are very fortunate that we have a very close working relationship with Microsoft as well as Epocler, which is our partner in Germany. And the NUHS Holomedicine program started in January this year. And since then, we have obtained our first research grant in March, as well as obtained a HSA Class A certification for the software that we are using together with Epocler. And we are quite fortunate to have multiple partners, both locally as well as the international arena for research and development projects. Now, in order for the program to work, there has to be a few themes when it comes to the objectives we are trying to achieve. So for the Holomedicine program at NUHS, we have divided it into clinical use cases, scientific research, educational use cases, as well as the infrastructure, processes, workflows, and guidelines. So for clinical research, we have divided it into, at this point in time, preoperative planning, intraoperative image guidance, as well as patient counseling. So here are some images for a few of the use cases that we have been using the HoloLens on so far. So the two images on the top left and bottom left represents actually a complex breast surgery case. The image on the top left, you can actually see that this is actually a multidisciplinary discussion prior to the surgery itself. So this is a patient who has a locally advanced breast cancer who is going for a resection. And over here, you can see in the picture, there is the breast surgeon, the cardiothoracic surgeon, as well as the plastics and reconstruction surgeon who is standing behind. And all three of them are actually using the HoloLens to look at the same MRI scan of the patient and discussing the operative strategy for the surgery that is going to begin. And the picture on the bottom left shows the breast surgeon, in this case, Dr. Oh Han Boon, overlaying the image of the MRI scan directly onto the patient as a real-time inline and in-plane image guidance for the surgery itself. And the picture on the bottom right actually shows a patient with an adrenal tumor. And this is the PET scan of the patient that is overlaid onto the patient themselves during the surgery. And of course, even before we enter the operating theater, we use the HoloLens for three-dimensional visualization of scans as well as 3D planning. The picture on the left shows myself looking at a patient who is going for a liver transplant surgery. The picture on the top right shows actually a very interesting case where a patient has dextrocardia, and the heart is actually a mirror image of what the normal anatomy is. And with the HoloLens, we can actually see very clearly where all the structures are. And this really gives us a very good spatial reference during the surgery itself. And the picture on the bottom right actually shows one of our first attempts at using the HoloLens for planning of the radiation fields for radiotherapy. So just a short video, right? This is the first-person view of what you see through the HoloLens itself. And as you can see, because the lens is transparent, you can, perceive the physical and outside world around yourself. There's no need for any special gloves or dongles in order to interact. It is fully gesture controlled. And, because of the way the HoloLens works and how mixed reality can perceive the world in 3D, you can see that the image here is also in 3D. And, because of the various cameras and sensors on the HoloLens, it actually anchors the image in space, meaning that I can feel free to walk around it without actually having the image move. And of course, we have the ability to overlay multiple segments at the same time. And this really helps with delineating the anatomy prior to a surgery. Right, so moving on to intraoperative image guidance, how we use it or how we are doing studies to use this is that, like what you see just now in the video, we are overlaying the patient's scans, either the raw CT scan, MRI, or PET scan directly onto the patient during the surgery itself, or we actually overlay segmented or pre-segmented scans onto the patient during the surgery. Right, and these are just some of our use cases, and we have actually found it particularly useful for neurosurgery, right? Because the brain is more or less a fixed structure within the skull. It doesn't move around. And the correlation between the preoperative scan and the intraoperative location of the tumor is actually very, very accurate. So again, a short video about intraoperative guidance. So this is one of our neurosurgeons who is using the HoloLens to locate a deep brain tumor. In this case, I believe it's a meningioma. that is actually smack in the middle. And the wand that you see on the left-hand side is actually one of the existing stereoscopic guidance machines, and we're using that as a visual reference. So this use case is very interesting. It's one of our first attempts at doing a brain mapping or neural mapping. Some of you may be familiar with the brain connectomics project, and the white lines actually represent the nerve tracks within the brain. And the void that you see with white lines bending around it, that's actually where the tumor is. And this is one of our use cases for a laparoscopic liver resection. So the main surgeon in this case is actually wearing the HoloLens during the surgery itself, right? And with the HoloLens, we can actually pull up all the segmented images of the vascular structures of the liver and leave that in front of us and use it as a visual reference and image guide during the surgery itself. And this video shows more of the pre-segmented scans. So in this case, we were actually using this for a laparoscopic donor for a living donor liver transplant. And you can see in this case, we actually managed to segment the hepatic veins, the portal vein, as well as the hepatic artery, and also the left lateral segment. And this is looking at what we would leave behind in the donor after the surgery has been completed. And we are trying to match the images between the laparoscopic view as well as the segmented image. And of course, patient counseling is one of the biggest areas that we are using HoloLens for. One of the biggest advantages with HoloLens is that we can actually have this feature called shared experience, where we can link multiple images together to share the same hologram. And with these two images, you can see actually, that the surgeon as well as the patient can discuss the patient's surgery, discuss the scans, discuss the anatomy using the hologram itself. And this is way better than just trying to explain either on a computer screen using a 2D image or just drawing out the anatomy on a piece of paper. And because these holograms are generated using the patient's own scans, they can see very clearly their own anatomy, why, for example, sometimes surgeries may be extremely complex or high risk, purely because the tumors that they have is very close to important structures. And we have received very good feedback from the patients that with the use of HoloLens, they have a much better understanding of their condition and have a much better understanding of the surgery that they're going to go for. And in terms of informed patient consent, I think this is one huge step forward for patient education. So currently at the National University Health System, we are trying or trialing HoloLens in various use cases. Most of them, as you can see, are in the operating theater, because this is where we see the biggest application in terms of the display of the three-dimensional images will be. But we are also exploring the use of HoloLens and Holomedicine outside the operating theater. We are exploring it as part of a trial at our hospital at home remote assistance, where the medical teams that go to visit patients in the community and at their homes will carry a HoloLens unit with them and communicate back with the hospital via a remote assistance. And we're also exploring the use of the HoloLens in the wards, the general wards itself in patient care, as well as in the operations and plannings area in the hospital. So moving on to scientific research and development programs, projects. The thing about the NUHS Holomedicine program is that we are not just interested in using the HoloLens for various use cases, in the operating theater or outside the operating theater, right? But we are also very involved in the basic scientific research, as well as the development of capabilities for the HoloLens, as well as mixed reality in general, so that we can use it for other use cases. So things we are working on include image auto-segmentation, soft tissue deformity, brain connectomics, bedside vein mapping, vascular reconstructions. So all this will form the base functions and basic modules of the HoloLens devices, as well as the AI technology behind what we're trying to do. And with time, with maturity of this technology, hopefully we'll see it being used in the clinical setting as a routine. So two areas that we're focusing a lot on now is computer vision, as well as AI-based tissue segmentation and deformity modeling. So one of the biggest advantages of the HoloLens and mixed reality devices is the multiple cameras that it has on the device itself. And because we are using this as a image overlay or image acquisition device, it is very important for us to have very accurate image tracking as well as object positioning data. So with advanced computer analytics into image analysis as well as computer vision, we are able to actually have very accurate tracking of the various objects that is in view of the HoloLens cameras. And this is very important for us to make sure that whatever image that we overlay onto the patient for future use cases, for example, direct intervention, is as accurate as possible with minimal deviation. And of course, AI-based tissue segmentation is very important because whatever we see on the HoloLens, if let's say we can segment out the individual structures, we can segment out tumors, that will be extremely, extremely useful. And one of the holy grail in terms of soft tissue surgery is to have the patient's scan compensate and move as the soft tissue is being moved around. So we all know that when we acquire a patient's scan pre-procedure, it is in the static stage. We can't sort of deform the CT scan or the patient's MRI scan once it has been acquired. But hopefully in the future, as we get more and more complex algorithms, as the computer vision and AI gets more and more mature, we hope that one day we will actually be able to get deformable and dynamic CT scans and MRI scans, which we can use as a real-time image overlay during the surgery itself. Now, of course, all this will not be possible without a very strong back-end infrastructure, which is why at NUHS, we are developing an entire network infrastructure and architecture behind the whole program, not just to support the HoloLens, but to support all the other AI as well as technology projects in the hospital itself. And we are very happy to say that we are embarking on a 5G trial together with Microsoft and Singtel to look at the feasibility of having 5G within the hospital to try and accommodate and cope with all the large amount of data that's being transferred with all the new technology and new devices that are being introduced. And of course, with high-speed data transfer, things like HoloPresence, where you can actually teleport someone from one location to another, and essentially work on the same hologram, even though you're actually not in the physically in the same space, or even to share multiple devices within the same operating theater. Right, all this requires very high-speed data transfer, very high-speed internet, in order for them to be seamless, in order for the user experience to be as enjoyable, as smooth as possible. And of course, just to touch a little bit about the educational use cases, this will be elaborated further on in the later segments of this conference. So we have a sister program at the Yong Lin School of Medicine at the National University of Singapore, where we are looking at using mixed reality in undergraduate medical student teaching, both for medical students as well as nursing students. And we are in the process of developing multiple modules to be used in this training curriculum. And Professor Alfred will elaborate more on this during his talk later in the day. So what are some of the hurdles and limitations that we are facing? The most important thing I think for Holomedicine is that we have to see a translation from bench to bedside, meaning that whatever we work on in the basic science research and development area, it has to at some point in time translate to usable modules and usable technology for clinicians on the ground, and also so that we can see the real benefits in the patients that we treat. So there are multiple layers before we can actually see this technology and these devices being used in the more general role. So of course, technology readiness will be the first thing we have to tackle. We have to make sure that whatever we are developing is at a level that it is deployable and it's safe to be used on the patients. Data security is going to be a very big point of discussion, which we'll address more later on in the panel discussion, because with the sheer amount of data that we're going to transmit across the devices, both within and outside the hospital, especially for remote assistance and remote proctoring, we have to ensure that whatever data that we transmit is secure and encrypted, right, and it will not leak out, causing a data breach. There has to be governance and regulations regarding the use of mixed reality technology in healthcare. And of course, there has to be user acceptance and also system acceptance and readiness in order for us to introduce this technology into routine daily use. So at the end of the day, in order for us to move forward, there are a few things that we have to address for holomedicine and extended reality in general. So first of all, is the fundamental AI research and development. If we don't solve the problems at this stage, then they will never become prototypes or products that we can introduce later on. We have to develop and identify suitable use cases where we think mixed reality can be very suitable for. There has to be, as I mentioned before, secure AI data network, and of course, user training and education, as well as a healthcare systems integration. So at the end of the day, why are we doing this? As a famous man once said, we do this not because they're easy, but because they are hard. And also mainly because we believe that this technology really has the potential to transform the way we practice medicine, to transform the way we practice healthcare, and really make a difference to the next patient that walks in through the doors of the hospital. And I always end with this quote: the best way to predict your future is to create it. And I think this is the best time for us to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Gao, for the great talk on how NUHS has adopted holomedicine. Next, I would like to invite Dr. Sun Myung-hee, Clinical Instructor of Pediatrics at the Samsung Medical Center, to give a talk on how holomedicine can be used in the emergency department. Dr. Sun, please.
Okay, I'm gonna share my slide first. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Again, my name is Myung-hee Son. I'm a pediatric hemato-oncologist. I'm working at Samsung Medical Center as a clinical instructor of Department of Pediatrics. And I'm a deputy director of the emergency department and legal director of the Korean Society of Pediatric Emergency Medicine. I really appreciate the invitation to the association, to today's summit, and I'm so privileged to share my limited experience with HoloLens 2. I was very excited to be invited, but at the same time, I wasn't sure whether if I have enough experience with holomedicine. But for sure, I haven't found shared information of those people who's actually applying HoloLens 2 to the emergency department. So I felt it would be a very good start to share my initial experience with the technology. So I have no conflict of interest to declare, and I wasn't sponsored with Microsoft at all, but most of my talk will be introducing how I'm using the program from Microsoft. Today's talk was mainly, most of the parts were previously already presented at spring conference of the Korean Society of Medical Informatics, and also at the fall conference of the Korean Society of Emergency Medicine. Although it is very limited experience compared to Nazia, I'm very fascinated with the technology and trying to convince as many people as possible in our country to convince them to start using this. So today's contents will be mainly 4 parts. Due to the limited time, I won't cover all the work that I was testing, but mainly I just want to introduce, main focus of my talk is to convince those people who haven't started or who haven't bought HoloLens 2, or who thinks it's too big things to start, to think that maybe I can start, I can just buy one and maybe I can try. That's my main focus. So I'm going to share how I just personally, because it's not about with the institution, or I don't have a grant yet, but still I can try and test and see how it works with dynamic 365 remote assist, and also secondly with the guide, and also how I want to apply this technology to our transfer system. And lastly, just want to mention why I cannot start right away at the institution level. So first, I'm going to share my experience with remote assist at emergency department. Maybe most of you already seen this video, but still wants to share this because this was the most wow video that I've watched online, and it was the main reason why I've started to use HoloLens 2 at ER. So it's not a waste of time to watch one more time for a minute. And when I first watched this video, I felt like, oh, this is just what I need at ER. And this is just exactly what we need to do, when we are consulting, and also when I'm supervising my trainees.
Their hands free to do the work.
So when there's a problem to solve at ER, it's same thing. I mean, it's not. It's this is
united across time and distance, more connected, more informed, and more efficient. Now employees can work together.
I'm going to start from here, and just maybe you can watch full video online if you haven't.
They can
and so after I watched this video, and although our institution is not like a huge giant hospital, but we have the main buildings are all separated, like 3 buildings are together, and although they're connected on a main floor, still it takes time to run from this building to next building. And especially in pandemic year, it was so hard to walk across the hospital, and there were so many doors to open and close to get access to the patient. And I got really tired of wearing PPE every time I see the patient. So I felt it would be nice to apply this technology to emergency department initially, just because I wanted to send my junior doctor to isolation unit with this gear and share what he sees or what he hear from the patient on my screen, and it worked perfect. So, and also I work with many trainees, and then they really liked it. Maybe I can share a one clip of video, which is in Korean. And since I couldn't share the video with my patient in it, so I just made very short video how it looks when we communicate with teams. And this is just a case, when doctor sees seizing a patient, then I can send algorithm to the doctor if he's not comfortable memorizing it. And this can be any different algorithm or guideline. And I really liked it, and also trainee really liked it very much. And also I liked the way I could mark on it, so they can focus on where to look at in emergency situation. And also this is another case. So for the when they have dermatologic issues, and sometimes we need to check the dermatome. So this is the case when I send
쪽으로 스킨래시가 보이고 있는데요.
when there are patients presented with vesicles, and then the trainee wants to check the dermatome, but is not sure which level the vesicles are on, then I can send the picture of the dermatome
So
actually, the trainee can compare the patient's presentation with the picture I've sent. So I just sent the picture, and then the trainee can just compare the dermatome level of the patient to the picture. So this is like another example how I use it. And also the best part of the
필부터 보겠습니다.
so also like when trainee sees the patient,
라이트 리플렉스는
and
있고요.
then I can send just the image of chest X-ray
또 한번
instantly when I get it, because in our hospital, like it takes like a couple minutes after they take it, and then sometimes they don't have monitor in isolation unit to check the image.
니아가 의심되는
Of course, we can do it actually. We can check on all mobile, but
예,
you know, this is really nice because
사운드
it frees
들어보겠습니다.
hands, and then also I can mark on patients like the body to where to listen to. This is just a simple example, and then I can ask like the trainee how it sounds on the marked area.
좀 크래클이
So the benefit of remote assist at ER was it was such an amazing tool for instant remote consulting, because it's faster, and also it saves resources, it saves times, and also PPE and etc. And it reduced infection like transmission risk in pandemic era, and it's very trainee friendly and good for education. It's not only can use only for the education who's actually seeing the patient, but also I can share this kind of videos with patients cases with the students, and also I can ask how they think, and then I can help them how to develop their clinical reasonings. And secondly, I was testing the dynamic guides at ER, and I decided to make just self-learning guide to set up the ventilator. This is just an example of the how I use the guide, and I just wanted to show how easy it is. So it's like PowerPoint. You can just decide what you want to like make instruction, and then just start. And then you can, for each step, you can just write down what step, what the instruction guide for to set up the ventilator from the beginning, from the turning on the power to until to the point that you connect to the patient. So I and then I split to the like so many like different steps, from the turning on the PowerPoint, the turning up the power, and to connect to the patient. And you can decide whatever setting you want. So this is an example that how I made the guide with the pictures. So each step, initially I put the picture of the step that I want the trainee to follow. And then after they see the picture and also just read the instruction. And then I helped a little bit where to like connect. So, and then they can move to the next step and also check the picture and also follow the instruction. And I can like put arrow or mark or anything I want the 3D. And then I realized that maybe the trainee doesn't want to read the instructions. So how about if I have video clip instead of pictures? So I took the video clip for each step like this. and then I recorded the instruction that was written before. And for each step, I changed the picture with these video clips. So you can now see from here that the trainee can watch the video clip and listen to the instruction. Of course, they can read it too. But it became much easier, and they felt much easier because they didn't need to read. And they could easily follow this step from the big, and then they can watch another video clip for the next step. So I made it like a short video, like less than a minute for each step. So easy to follow. And the benefit of the guide, like it was amazing for the self-learning guide because it's easy to develop the learning tool and also to follow the tool. And you can make any the instruction for any device of institution's demand, and also personalized training schedule. You don't need to schedule like a training time. You can set up the room with any device that you want to train. Then you make the guide in advance, and then they can choose the time, and also they can repeat as much as they want. And also at the same time, if you want, it can be remotely assisted while they are following the guide. You can, I sometimes do the Teams talk and then help them to move forward. So, and the third part is what I want to do in the future, which I'm writing a grant for this project, which I didn't get it yet. This is for a seamless transfer between the institutions. Maybe it may seem, I mean, the South Korea seem very small to most of you, but still, like, it takes time to travel. Like, for example, from Busan, which is the second biggest city in South Korea, to Seoul, which has major hospitals in the country, it takes about 4 to 5 hours to drive, and about 2.5 hour train, and also an hour flight. We also have like islands, like many islands, including the biggest island, Jeju Island, and it also takes an hour flight. And so we need to we have like a lot of transfer patients from these islands and also from different cities in the countries, and the communication between physicians are very important. And to decide whether the patient should be transferred or they can stay there, or also for to prepare the process of the transfer, and also to continue the patient's care at the referral hospital. So at the moment, the communication is mainly done on the phone, and the files of the patient's image or the data of the labs are sometimes sent via email or by text image. But in the future, I really want to have this system between the referral hospital and regional hospitals. So mainly we can communicate with just sitting in front of our own computer, looking at the patient's image or labs, and it can be very instant sharing data instead of sending the files. Because, for example, like we get transferred of many patients with underlying disease. And for example, if the pediatric patients with cancer, they have long history at the referral hospital. They've been already treated at the referral hospital, and they went back to their city. And then when they visit regional hospital, the physician and regional hospital have no idea how the patient was treated, or how was his x-ray look like just a month ago. Then we just want to compare, because compare the image that the patient had before and the recent image. So we can tell that the problem that he's having is the recent or the something that he had for a long time. But this is all about how I get the grant, and also still in the process of convincing our institution. So we'll see. Lastly, so I just want to share why can we start the system right away, although we really like it. I mean, when I say we, it's mostly emergency department, but just want to share the critical issues, because it's all about the cost, and it's expensive. The HoloLens 2 is still more expensive than the most expensive mobile device. So I think it's about the price, and also the device. The price for device is not all, like it takes. It costs a lot to set up the system. So luckily, if we get the good grant to do the experiment setting, then I will be so happy to do what I've been testing and also do the new experiments. Secondly, I still realize that although I really eager to train my colleagues, it takes time for them to learn. Like Yuzia already mentioned that about the technology readiness and also system acceptance. And not all the people are like me. I mean, sometimes people don't like the new technology. I mean, a lot of them still are not sure whether they need it. And also, even they like it, the longest time it took was to learn how to use the gestures of the hands to use HoloLens 2, and also like some eye tracking. So finally, the trainee can use HoloLens 2 like freely with her hand. And lastly, it's about internet connection. It has to be fast. If I want to run the video clips, and also has to be safe. You already mentioned that we are very conscious with the patient's privacy issue and also data safety of the data sharing. So this maybe can be the major hurdle at the moment that we need to overcome. And in addition, like for ER, it's not like operation room that mainly you are staying in one room. I have to wear HoloLens 2 and move around the department. And it's not huge area, but some of the areas are connected to different Wi-Fi. And then when I move from one room to the other, like I get disconnected and they need to connect it again. So maybe this will be solved if the data issue, like the safety of data issue is solved. And then if the gear is hooked to the 5G in the institution level, but at the moment, if we are using the Wi-Fi for area, that this is the issue that I'm experiencing. But at the end, if these issues can be overcome, and I believe it will be solved soon, like maybe in near future, then it would be so helpful to gather. I mean, Yuzia already showed a lot of data that we can share, and mainly about the anatomy maybe. But for me, it would be very fascinating tool to collect patients like face expression, sounds, pose, gestures, the data that we couldn't collect before. But this is the type of the data that I'm very interested in, and would be very nice to have HoloLens too, to collect these data and process, and then to make algorithm to predict recognition of like acute ill looking, or the recognition of abnormal neurologic sign, something like the algorithm that we couldn't try before. So finally, this is the future ED that I want to have with Holomedicine. So it will be like we can have collaborative solving problem at the full speed, and we'll be stay focused on the critical procedures with free hands, and we can the most fascinating part is we can work together across the world and also with anyone in the buildings or outside of the buildings. And lastly, if we collect all these data of patients' expressions, pose, gestures, movement, then at the end, maybe we'll have the algorithm to recognize patient's problem before one realize. So thank you so much. Maybe the was very limited time to share my experience, but thanks again for invitation. And I'll be very happy to have any comment or question through the panel discussion or personal email. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sun, for the interesting talk on how you have adopted Holomedicine for the emergency department at your medical center. Now we have a panel discussion on Holomedicine's use in clinical care. The panel consists of Prof. Ngiam Ki Yuan, Dr. Gao Yijia, Mr. Diomedes Kastanis, and Dr. Sun Myung Hee. Prof. Ngiam is a senior consultant from the Division of General Surgery and also the Group CTO at NUHS. Mr. Kastanis is the CTO at Microsoft APAC. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for participating in this panel. Maybe to start the discussion, here's a question from the audience. What is the extent of utilization right now in the healthcare industry? Is the Holomedicine already prepared to enter OT? And what are the big challenges in this regard? Prof. Ngiam, do you have any comments on this?
Thanks for that question, Kenway. I think we are in the early days of the use of Holomedicine in the hospital as well as the community settings. The promise is there, and those of us who have tried to use it can see clearly how this is going to be beneficial, not just for our patients, but for training clinicians and for guidance, especially during surgery. If you consider the kind of possibilities that we can build in a HoloLens environment, it really is endless, right? If you think about it. So what we really need now is the kind of effort and investment in pushing for new applications in Holomedicine. And I want to add to one more point, and this is to the video that was shown right at the beginning of this event. And that is the point that when people talk about new experiences, right? The mixed reality experience, in my opinion, is as close as you can get to what a blend between virtual and the real world, because you're not in a virtual environment. You are in your environment, the real environment, but with enhanced objects in your environment. So you can imagine that kind of enhanced reality would actually bring forth a new sense of realism. And in healthcare, there's so many applications, right, that require that kind of new realism that will change the way we do things. So I would say that we are really right in the beginning of this phase, and we hope to be a major player going forward. Thanks.
Yeah, if I could just add to that question. So the thing about the use of mixed reality or HoloLens in the operating theater or in the clinical space is that, like what Prof. Ngiam said, we are in the early stages. We are still trying to explore where this technology is applicable and where it is more of a nice to have rather than something that is needed. So the thing is, we shouldn't try and force technology into areas where it is not really applicable or there isn't really a much of a use for it. Because the thing is, if we try and force it into areas where it is not meant to be, then of course the overall user experience, both from the clinician perspective, from the researchers, from the patients wise, is not going to be very optimal. And the thing is that if that happens, then we will experience a slump in the uptake, because people will think that this is just a gimmick and it's not something that's going to be very useful. So we have to be very careful in terms of choosing where we want to apply this technology and where we think it's going to be of the most help, which is why during the presentation that I had earlier, I mentioned that it is important for us to choose our use cases very carefully, especially right at the start, because we want to have a good beginning in order for us to maintain the momentum and to maintain the the interest within this technology and not have it die off over some time, which we've seen with some of the previous VR and AR technology. Right, there's a lot of hype. There was a lot of hope and potential for it, but for various reasons, either in its application or in its development, it didn't really deliver on some of its promises, which is why it sort of just petered out after a while. And we don't really want to see this happen with Holomedicine and with extended reality devices. So we've been trying this for at least in NUHS for coming to a year, and what we found was that the mixed reality and the HoloLens has a very specific niche and a very unique use area within, especially in the operating theater. And what we found was that it is of the biggest benefit because it manages to shift the cognitive load of the clinician from one area to another. And what I mean by this is that, for example, for liver surgery, right? Before HoloLens and mixed reality, we are always looking at the patient's scan on a 2D, two-dimensional computer screen, right? And we all know that the liver anatomy is extremely complex, right? There's a biliary system, there's the portovenous system, there's the arterial system, and you have to try and visualize in your mind how exactly this liver looks in real life. Right? Because when you begin to cut and start your transection through the liver itself, you have to maintain orientation of where you are at all times during the surgery. And it takes years for a clinician to be able to train to have that three-dimensional image within their head, and to transform that 2D image that they see on the screen into a 3D representation that they can understand. Right. So what we found with the HoloLens is that it sort of skips that step for the clinician. Right now, we don't have to try and make sense of how the anatomy is supposed to look like. It can be rendered in 3D, and because it is displayed as a 3-dimensional hologram, it is still very different from looking at a 3D recon on a computer screen. Right? Because a 3D recon on a computer screen at the end of the day is still a 2-dimensional projection. But now you have a 3-dimensional projection with accurate volumes and accurate anatomy. And essentially, it gives you, what we always say, X-ray eyes. So you can see through the patient and see exactly what's inside. And we found that this is extremely useful, especially for trainees and junior attendings, where they're trying to mount the learning curve. And, because now we have managed to, have this cognitive shift of a cognitive load from trying to understand the scan to something that's very simply displayed in front of them, they can use that time and energy to actually think about the surgery in more detail. How are they going to approach the liver? How are they going to approach the tumor? Which are the critical areas that they have to avoid? So it brings a whole new dimension to training as well as the surgery itself. Right? Having said that, the feedback that we had was that for the very experienced surgeons, they don't actually need the HoloLens, right, when it comes to intraoperative guidance, because they have been doing it for so many years and they're so familiar, they know exactly what's going on, right? And that's the honest truth, which is why I say that, we have to find where this piece of technology is going to fit within the healthcare sector, because it's not going to be useful for everyone out there. Not every single clinician or every single use case is actually going to have a use for the HoloLens itself, right? But it does have tremendous benefits, and it's just up to us to try to find where there is.
I think that's where the Holomedicine association comes in as well, right? Because we work very closely with the clinicians and make sure that whatever technology that we push forward has a actual end user kind of use cases.
Yes, exactly. So I mean, one of the greatest things that we have at the association is that it is not an association of pure clinicians. It is a mix of clinicians, data scientists, policymakers, as well as industry partners. And at the association, we are looking at forming working groups where we look at specific use cases in the healthcare sector, and we can link up clinicians with data scientists and industry partners to tackle and address specific challenges within the sectors itself. And this really is sort of the beginning of a translation from bench to bedside. Yeah, so happy to hear if Dr. San has any views, and also Mr. Kastanis, any views on this?
Yeah, thank you, Yujia. I totally agree with what you've mentioned already about what something that we should be very careful for the first use case. That's why what I've been very trying hard on, because if they don't have good experience, it can't continue, especially when it's something that it takes time to adjust to the new technology. And also, like, so for me, I think it's more important thing, like like software is very important, but I think something I feel very I feel something like when do you remember when we first had cell phone? Like that's how I see, like my daddy's first Motorola, like a brick cell phone. He had it, but he never used it for calling. But I mean, it didn't take long. Then nobody can live without a cell phone, right? So that's something how I say it. So even we work really hard to develop these like softwares and something that like very advanced technology. I think at the same time we should be very we should work hard to let every clinician at least wear it. I mean, even just for communication. Like that's why I focus on consulting, because initially when I saw the technology, we wanted to apply to the sonar guided central line insertion, and also like video guided tracheal intubation, something like that. But it was like it was a harder step. I mean, so I decided, oh, maybe this is a second step that I should move forward, because the institution is not ready, and also the physicians are not ready for this. But like that's why I introduced the remote assist and also dynamic guides, because they have to be very I mean, the HoloLens 2 should be friendly first. So I mean, if they can consult easily, I mean, that's why I showed today like how easy it is, just to emphasize how easy it is. And it's not something that someone who has who is into technology can experience it. So that's what I emphasize to my colleagues, and just let's start using it. I mean, just for consulting, and also to train the device, and same with the surgery. I mean, for those who already know how to set up the ventilator, I mean, they don't need HoloLens 2. It's inconvenient. They can just do it, and even they have some experience with even they haven't set up the ventilator. If they had enough time that they were exposed, then I think maybe the HoloLens 2 is not helpful at the moment, but they're very novice. So I think this is really good for those areas that they are not if they don't have someone to like supervise or train the instruction, then this is such a good tool for novice people just to follow. And so it's so easy. I mean, someone asked me if it is hard to follow the guide, but it wasn't hard for them to follow the guide to set up the ventilator. It just took forever to to learn how to use HoloLens 2. I mean, it took several hours how to manipulate the HoloLens 2. But as soon as if they get used to it, following the guide was just, it's so easy. I mean, everyone can do for the first try. So, and also even for me, like setting up the instruction guide for any device it won't be hard. I mean, if you know what to instruct, and if you have any device that you want to train, then you can just do it like as just like making PowerPoint for the presentation. And also like for the transfer part, I mean, it's the same reason, because the grant I'm writing for the transfer is to get to involve as many institutions at the same time. So many physicians in different hospitals can experience at the same time. So we can build up the system, not only in our institution, but as like a country level. And it would be nice to have like just get used to the system, to the technology, because I think it's like fascinating and it's a matter of time.
So we have a question from the participant. They're asking you whether you face any hurdles in the usage of holomedicine in the ventilator training, or any issue with hosting the information. And in general, when you're using mixed reality in the emergency department, right, are there any issues that you have faced thus far?
Oh, I don't get the question. Maybe I don't know whether if I got the question right. What do you mean by like hosting the information? Like,
I guess just in general, like when you're using mixed reality with all the connectivity stuff, right? Are there any general limitations that you have experienced thus far?
Not really. I mean, if you know what to like, usually you have like we chose very old ventilator just to experiment to make the instruction hard. Yeah, I mean, if you have a newer version, like it won't take long. I just wanted to have like long steps of instruction just to test how it works. But still, I didn't have any problem setting up the instruction guide and having the augmented reality to like to point where they should look, and also to point like to use all these arrows, and only using the three parts from the guide itself was very helpful. I didn't have any issue like setting up the like a guide program.
Yeah, I think
also
sorry, I think your presentation just now, it was very clear that it was pretty easy to set up the 360 dynamic stuff also.
And I'm surprised that it's not used as many as
yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think this should be used for training. Yeah, more often.
Yeah.
I'm sure the pickup will be better in the near future, right? Especially after you shared it with us.
I'm using just as a like I'm paying monthly to Microsoft for the guide and remote assist, and I'm like personally I'm so happy with the program itself. Yeah, only the issue is the reason why I couldn't share the video is I didn't have a tool to identify patient's face, because it's not like operation room. The patients are all covered up. So most of my patients, they have face and you can tell who they are. So if in the future, if we can, if we have like a program to identify the patients, because now we have all like face recognition algorithm, so it won't be hard to make like the identification program installed in HoloLens 2. Then the usage will be like, it will expand quickly. And
thank you.
Yeah, Dr. Son is happy to support you on this. I mean, obviously, we do a lot of work on face recognition at Microsoft, obviously, right? And not just the face recognition, as well as different, let's say, overlay services, right, on top of computer vision, right? Whether it's, and I just want to say, like, congratulations again to everyone, especially Dr. Gao, Andrew, and so forth. Like the amount of impact you guys are making to the industry that helps us as Microsoft to become even better, and also prolong, the utilization of what I call human-computer interaction is just amazing, right? So happy to support you in any way I can from a Microsoft perspective to deliver new experiences for your patients, right?
Yeah, thank you, Diomedes. Just wanted to emphasize that there are not only like image for the patient's data. Like HoloLens 2 will be another like a huge tool to collect the data from the patient. I mentioned in the presentation the patient's voice, like sound
yeah.
and how they look and then how they, their neurology, like how they move, like their tremors. And sometimes it's hard to tell like they are seizing or if it's pseudo, like, so if we can, I mean, the technology already can recognize the gestures and movement and those skeletons, algorithm can be, if it can be installed in HoloLens 2, and if we can collect all those data as the identified manner,
And
then it will be like a huge data that we can collect from patients. And in the future, it will be like used to develop algorithm to detect the patients like a voice change or how they breathe, instead of like just checking their vital signs and their image. Like this will be another like a whole area, like different from the surgery part.
And what I wanted to say here, Dr. Son, is like, and Dr. Gao and team, right? I mean, at Microsoft, we have spent a lot of time trying to democratize, right, the ability to create new applications. I wanted to share with you, we have acquired a new company called Lob.ai, right? I can show you very quick, right? The whole intent of Lob.ai is to be able to train machine learning models over computer vision without having to code. You basically, I can share if there is time, I don't know, I can share a quick demo, right? Just for you to see how amazing it is, the ability to gather enough images of the training person, whether it's face, gestures, etc., drop them in a file in your laptop and allow Lob AI to create models that next time you see the same thing, you can actually recognize it. So to your point about whether you're wearing a mask, whether you tremor, whether you seizure, or whether, any type of different capability, now at the hands of domain experts like yourselves, like doctors, be able to drive that training of that model without having to do anything. It's as easy as when you're taking a photo, you put it in your directory, as easy as that, right? So you drop it in, then the tool goes inside, it does all the training, and now you can start applying applications that really benefits your service, right, into your own capabilities without having to rely on development units and developers and so forth, right? Make it really, really easy for you to do that. Very, very nice. Zero code is what we call doctor citizen developer platform, right? And allows you to do a lot of stuff. So if you want, I can share with you a little bit of that. And also, you mentioned a very good point also, Dr. Son, and of course, Dr. Gao, around how do we manage data? How do we manage security? You mentioned about 5G, Wi-Fi, and so forth. I would also like to touch a little bit upon that, because with the introduction of new technologies, and I will give a parallelism to autonomous car, which is an interesting concept as well, right? How technology precedes regulation, it precedes laws, precedes security, right? And how we as technology companies, we're trying to work with regulators and hospitals and so forth to ensure that we have highest degree of governance, compliance, and security in order for us to really capitalize on innovation.
Mr. Katasny, we have some time for you to show the demo if you want.
Yeah, sure. Let me take, I will share my desktop. Let me show you two things, right? So let me just make sure here that it works. 1 second, I need to allow. Yeah. Oh. I think I cannot share my desktop for some reason. Let me just try again. Hold on. Can you see my desktop?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So here you can see, this is the company I was talking about. We just acquired that company. The intent of that company is called Lob AI, is to be able to gather pictures, drop them in the folder, and we work as a machine learning model on the background to create a different association, right, of the pictures to this, like how when you use color. I mean, this is simple examples of obviously, but it can get really, really complicated. But the intent here is to say that you don't have to code. You just download this in your laptop. You upload the pictures into your directory, right, in the whether you're using Mac or Windows, and then automatically this particular application is running to create those examples. So here you can see different examples, very, very easy to create, right? So you can see different type of examples like identifying objects, identifying sleep, identifying, readiness, like when you're ready. It's like amazing, right? Zero code. Just drag and drop, everything will happen automatically, right? So that is, I think, a very nice, a very nice area. You can see the plurality of examples, right? They can go from deep chemistry and bio to Firewatch to, you know, just looking at bees. I have a very nice demo I have done myself at my home to monitor, you know, the growth of tomatoes, like because I do some little planting, like very nice. You don't have to do anything. You can, and it's very easy to use. I think that is very important because, to your point, Dr. Son, as you were saying, if I could, now you can, right? So now you can take those pictures of the different instances that you see, whether it's videos or images, and drop them there and start creating the annotation, right, of those images in a very well established models. So that was the first example. And the second example, as I was mentioning, right, we're at inflection point when it comes to digital innovation and legal framework. And this is not new just for not new just for the industry of healthcare, right? This is new even for autonomous cars. I wanted to show you a quick example to see how complicated the definition of a framework could look like in this simple example. MIT, I started at MIT, and you know, they have created what they call the moral machine. The moral machines for autonomous cars is to do things like that. If you have a car of 5 passengers with 3 kids and 1 kid and 2 dogs hitting a ramp, that those 5 guys will die, as opposed to diverting right and hitting those guys that they are coming. What should the AI do, right? What should the law do, right? And I think those moral machine discussions, right, are also applicable for security and compliance in healthcare as well. And that's why one of the work we have been doing, and thank you, Dr. Gao, again, for your collaboration in this, is to define compliance as and security as an integral part of innovation, and moving all the way from, you know, core compliance teams, which are quite scarce, and you know, somewhere in the hospital and somewhere in the service providers and on the cloud providers, to what we call autonomous compliance. And what that really means is the ability to identify, define policies, define management, observability, security, tokenization, masking, and so forth, right? At a comprehensive framework that allows you as a clinician to ensure and rest assured that compliance is met in a transparent way and always on for all your operations that you are performing. And I just want to show, like, we have done this at Microsoft. So you can see here, we're just launching, is in public preview now. It's a new capability. We call it regulatory compliance. And if you can see on the top here, the different compliance benchmarks, and you can create also your own. And that's the beauty about it, right? So we can actually work with you to understand the regulatory framework and how does it apply to data, and apply this across people, processes, and data and technology, and rest assured with a overlay of your visibility to be able to see how compliant I am across the entire facade of your capabilities, whether it's data protection, whether it's what users should do, how data should be transferred, should it be always encrypted, and so forth. And last but not least, we are very proud to say that at least from an innovation perspective, we have now brought a lot of new capabilities in our stack that allows you to do always encrypt applications. And the most amazing thing, which is also open source, is this area of homomorphic encryption. And Dr. Gao knows this very well, that he has done some work. How can you do machine learning operations, predictions, forecasting, the root cause analysis without, and this is amazing, decrypting the data? So you can actually never expose the data information, but still do a very good forecast model based on fully encrypted data. Therefore, you don't become custodian, you don't have the risk of leak, but yet you do not sort of compromise yourself in terms of innovation. So I mean, I'm so humbled to see all this great work that you guys are doing, and I'm so humbled to be part and maybe add a little bit of value from my side. So thank you again very much, Dr. Gao, Dr. Kian. I mean, it's amazing the work you guys are doing.
Actually, Prof. Niam, I'm aware that we have some AI network in NUHS, right? will it benefit from this encryption kind of thing, or?
Yeah, so the issue of data sharing has been a major concern, and I think earlier in the Q&A, I addressed some of the points about what are the challenges in security with AR, VR, and MR. Well, I think the challenges in AR, VR, MR are no different from all the other challenges in terms of security that we face today, right? So, the same two big areas are always considered. So how do you de-identify anonymized data, and how do you then collaborate and run machine learning and deep learning algorithms? So, so really, the kind of challenges we have today are no different from the past in the past. And what Diomedes was pointing out, homomorphic encryption, that's been a research topic for many, many years. It is still, I think, emerging. There are still significant challenges in using, for example, neural network tools on homomorphically encrypted data. So from a data sharing perspective, I would say that currently what we do at NUHS is to de-identify and secure the environment in which we share the data, rather than run, say, homomorphic encryption. But however, that is not the end state, right? The end state we wish to have is the ability to share data freely with anyone, right? And they should be able to use that data without worrying about, data loss or data leakage. I think that's the end state. The next sort of feasible step in this space, I would imagine, would be federated learning. So in between sites or institutions that want to work on the same data, they can use federated learning. So that, just to explain what that means, right? So that's the use of applying the machine learning code on the various sites, and then sort of being able to sum it up all together and give a overall weight. So nobody needs to share any data. The data sets just need to be aligned, and the code can be shared between the sites to run federated learning. Now, so federated learning sounds like a super elegant idea, right? However, there are some real challenges, and we've tried to do that at the international, local and international level. So the key challenge is actually the data quality. So on this point, I know this is the Holomedicine Association meeting, but I just want to emphasize the point that your data quality must be absolutely pristine before you can do federated learning. It's virtually impossible to do any of that without clean data and clean aligned data schemas. Now, just one quick point on the business of sharing, three-dimensional images via the HoloLens. I think it follows the same kind of security requirements as for any data. It's not just unique to Holomedicine. However, the difference here is that the size of the files are much larger, and when we use the HoloLens in real time, we often have bandwidth limitations, despite sometimes the best kind of connection. So the size of the file and the kind of rendering and the kind of processing that's required on the Azure cloud is absolutely humongous, right? So I think new or newer standards need to be put in to allow us to transact Holomedicine effectively in the clinical practice. And one of those areas that we've mentioned, or Dr. Gao mentioned earlier, was the use of 5G. So we're really pushing that boundary, trying to get 5G in the indoor setting so that we are able to smoothly share this information in a secure manner with others meaning others in the organization, and hopefully with better encoding standards, we are able to then share in between organizations that is outside of, say, a country, for example. So that's where I think that this is going. Thanks.
Just maybe one comment. It's absolutely amazing, your comments. One thing I wanted to say about federated or transfer learning is the contribution of blockchain, because sometimes you can actually store the models on a blockchain in order for you to be able not to have bias or transparent bias in the way a model predicts, right? So it's amazing your concepts around innovation. Happy to support you. I mean, we're doing a lot of work in that space. How do we protect models? How we give transparency to models, to your point, right? And also how we as you talked about data quality and data masking and so forth, we have now open source a new concept called Presidio. I think you will like it a lot, where auto identifies PII information and create a hash in order for the recipient system, right, in data sharing to be able to work on the data, but without decrypting it. It's like so thankful for you to launch all these concepts. Thank you so much, Doctor.
Thanks, Jimmy.
So, Prof. Yam, so up to now, we have seen a lot of presentations and use cases regarding like a clinical or surgical setting, right? But I'm just thinking, is there potential, right, for Holomedicine to use or replace existing hospital operational needs instead of just the clinical or surgical kind?
Yeah, so from an operational point of view, I think there are many opportunities. Especially, you know, the way I've always seen it is, you remember Tony Stark in Iron Man, right? So, you know, you put that on and suddenly you can see 10 screens, and the idea of having a command center of the past becomes shrunken down into this headset. You don't need to have 10 huge screens, and of course I would love to have 10 huge Samsung screens, yeah, Mizon can sponsor some of them, but but the idea that you can put this lens on and suddenly you have as many screens as you want, and you can zoom in on some, you can manipulate some, much like how you see it in Iron Man, right? I mean, you suddenly have that amazing power to do that, and that's really cool, right? And I think from the operations point of view, they may not have seen this yet, and as with anything, right? Once you demonstrate it once, right? Like your experience in Korea, once you show somebody once, right? Then they get hooked, they understand, right? Wow, this is so amazing. We're going to use this, right? So I think for the administrators, it's really about saying, okay, let's build a demo for them and let's let them try it out, and they'll go like, wow, can I have more of this? Because this is what we really need in the administrative setting. Yeah.
Cool. So I see a question from the chat. Someone's asking whether there are grant opportunities available for Holomedicine. Maybe Dr. Gao, you'd like to talk about this?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So, I mean, in terms of funding, there's various avenues that we can explore. Of course, depending on which institute you're in and which country you're in, there are usually competitive or non-competitive grants that you can apply for the use of, a mixed reality, especially in the research arena. From the association side, what we are trying to establish is a funding channel where we can get sponsorship either from industry partners or from people who are interested to invest or to help out with this program and the research and development effort behind this, and to channel them to the various institutes and hospitals that come under the association. Right, so these fundings can either be in the form of directed fundings, meaning that they are aimed at a specific project that we are supporting through the association, or they can be undirected funding, meaning that it is a sum of money that's given to the association, and depending on which are the active project that's ongoing under the association, then we can actually channel funding to them to support as well. And we are definitely looking at ways of supporting hospitals and institutes to actually start the program, giving them some seed funding, seed grant to at least get things going. And from there, we can actually build on the pilot programs for bigger grant applications and bigger funding applications. So for those who are interested in exploring, starting your own Holomedicine program or HoloLens program within your hospital or institutes, I have actually posted the secretary email for the association in the chat box. Where do drop us an email, and then we will get back to you as soon as possible to explore how we can help you set up your own program, how we can get some funding channels coming towards you, and really how we can assist in helping you, pick this technology up for use in your hospital. Right, thanks.
Right. So just now we were talking a bit about the legal and regulatory issues, right? So can I check with the panel, is the HoloLens and or the Holomedicine technology FDA approved?
maybe I'll take this first. So if I'm not wrong, the approval, for example, like for FDA, CE marking, and for Singapore, the HSA Health Science Authority, this mainly come with the software that is embedded within the HoloLens itself. Because the thing about HoloLens is that it is not a industry specific or a use case specific device, right? The way we see it is that we see that this is like a laptop or a computer that you can wear on top of your head, with its own processor and screen and everything, right? So like how we certify, other medical software, other medical products, we don't actually certify the computer. For FDA or CE marking, we certify the software that goes behind it, and because that's where all the algorithm, it lies, and that's where all the processing lies and everything. The HoloLens itself is an what they call an enabler, right? Meaning that it is a platform for us to deploy these solutions, for us to use. It depends on which software you are looking at. So there are many different softwares out there in the market or in the development phase when it comes to healthcare and deployment for mixed reality. Some of them are FDA approved, some are CE marking approved, right? The one we use in Singapore, which is the virtual surgery intelligence developed by Apoclar in Germany, right? This is CE marking and HSA Class A approved, right? So it depends on the regulatory bodies within the country itself, right? And also it depends on what your intent of use of the software is going to be. Right? For example, if you're only going to use it for, for example, pre-surgical planning or image visualization for education, then you don't actually need very high certification. But if you intend to develop something that's going to be used for direct patient intervention, and then of course you will need more stringent regulations and higher approvals from the various regulatory bodies. Yep. So maybe Prof. Niam and Mr. Kastanis, you can chip in on this as well.
Yeah, just a quick point here. I think a lot of people are concerned about this, right? Because they think that this is a medical thing, but really it isn't. So I think the first principle is that whether or not you're using the HoloLens with a medical claim. So if you're using the HoloLens to say that I want to improve the accuracy of navigation in the surgery so that it results in better outcome. Now that's a medical claim, but even then, right, it is minimal in the sense that it is essentially for the purposes of navigation, and you will be considered a class 1. Yeah, so those are my comments, but everything else is actually not considered an FDA regulated event.
Mr. Kasani, do you have any thoughts on this? Or Dr. Son?
I think it's pretty much close to what Yuzia already said, because this is the HoloLens 2 itself is just like, to me, it's like a mobile. I mean, it's not a medical gear. And it's all matter of what you are applying. I mean, the area or the purpose that you are claiming for. Like if it's for diagnosis, I mean, the regulation will be harder. If it's for the treatment outcome, I mean, it will be harder. But if it's for training or consulting, those things are not really like hardly regulated, I think, in Korea too. So it's all matter of the area and the purpose that you're aiming for. So and also that's why for the medical claim, I mean, we want to when we are using it as a clinician, we also want to show the clinical outcome too. I mean, as outcome. So that's like another part that anyway we need to find the good regulation form too. I mean, and I think I already mentioned, but the technology should guide and also to convince the regulators that this is how safe it is. I mean, they don't know how the new technology is. So I think the new technology also always has a responsibility to convince and to show the regulators that this is how it works and the safety of it itself. I mean, it's hard for them to make their own regulation when they are not familiar with the technology. So it's very new technology in Korea. So I'm sure there's no like exact guide just for the holomedicine itself, for sure. But even they want to make regulation, they need the guide to realize how, I mean, they need to know how it works, and also the purpose, and also the area, and what we are trying to do. That's how, that's my opinion.
Yeah, you just want to talk about how the Holomedicine Association can help with some of these guides?
Yeah, correct. So one of the working groups from the association is regarding policy and guidelines. And, we are trying to sort of establish what are the, guidelines, policy standards that actually govern the use of mixed reality in the clinical practice, right? Both patient fronting and non-patient fronting. I mean, Diomedes knows this very well. We have been talking to him about, how we should go about doing this, how can we leverage on, expertise of the various governing bodies to try and get all these standards out, because we know that in the healthcare sector, everything that we do has to have guidelines. They have to have standards. We have to have references that we can use so that we know that we're doing the right thing, and we're not just, doing things on a whim and, potentially causing harm to the patient, right? So this is very, very important, and it's one of the major things that we are working on from the association point of view. And we hope to actually release a consensus paper or a consensus guideline governing the standards and ethics behind the use of holomedicine in clinical practice. Yes.
And I also love what Dr. Son said, because I mean, ultimately, it requires a little bit of education and collaboration with the regulatory bodies, right? I mean, we're doing very, very similar work on 5G specifically, and Korea is leading some of the work on 5G, as well as Singapore, when it comes to private, public, hybrid, and so forth. I think like getting a little bit more entangled with the governing bodies will obviously help. And I think what you guys are doing in the Holomedicine Association, it's amazing, because ultimately you would need a force. I mean, if you look at the parallelism of 5G, there you have GSMA, you have 3GPP, right? So those are the two associations that they're really dealing with governing and compliance, as well as the standardization. I think Holomedicine Association could be one of that leading forces, right? That brings the industry together and educates and collaborates with the governing bodies in order for them to understand and embrace that technology faster, right? So obviously, healthcare is a complicated space, but I think it's a great initiative.
Since I'm using the technology at the clinical setting, which I really want to apply to, for me, like the masking and de-identifying the face is like a most essential part at the moment. And since because I always like we need permission from the patient at the moment, because we are not we don't use any way to mask their face. So it's very limited experience when you need to get a permission every time when you're streaming the patient's condition to different physician. But we are not getting any permission when we are consulting with our cell phone, or when we are consulting on like EMR. Actually, we are not asking patient that if I can consult with another doctor, right? But since I'm streaming their face, I don't feel comfortable doing, even it is for the patient's sake. I don't feel comfortable consulting like patient's condition, streaming the face to different doctors, or even like, especially if I want to share with the students or the trainees, like I always need the permission that I'm gonna stream. So the essential part of the collecting data and streaming is for me, it's to how to mask or how to de-identify, because even the system is very encrypted, and we all talked about the safety of how the data processed and managed and stored, and also how we can, it doesn't matter. I mean, when we are streaming the face, we cannot, we always need to explain to the patients that your face is streaming, and then it limits the experience and utilization at the clinical setting. So the very first essential program I need is to how to mask their face.
To blur, right? Yeah. We can do that. Yeah.
But at the same time, I want to collect their their expression and how they look and their color. but still like the identifying
Yeah,
their,
yeah, yeah. This is an
privacy.
interesting one. Yeah.
Uh-huh. And you also mentioned that if we do it too much, then the data we are collecting will be, limited, right? For the future algorithm. So, I mean, that's something that we need to balance.
You can see that transition, right, in a layered approach.
Mhm.
While you apply a layer, it's like if you use Photoshop, right? You have layers, right? One layer is to obfuscate because AI doesn't work on the image itself. It works on the underlying bit stream, right? So I think you can still do all these expressions, but still blur at the same time.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
different. So it's an interesting project. I mean, happy to support you on this.
Yeah, and also like at the same time later on that data could it be able to like convert it to original image too, right?
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Prof. Niam, Dr. Gao, Mr. Kasanis, and Dr. Sun for the vibrant discussion on how holomedicine can be used, the legal, safety, regulatory issues, and stuff. So this marks the end of the first panel, and we'll now have a short break and can resume the next part of the session at 11:10 SGT, so in around 10 minutes time. So if there's any questions, you can feel free to put it in the Q&A window, and we'll answer them either through text or in the next panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Welcome back everyone to the second half of this session. Before we continue, if anyone is interested in taking this topic further after the session, please feel free to engage us on Twitter with the hashtags shown in the Zoom chat. You can scroll up to around 9:30 a.m. Yeah. Right. So for the next talk, we'll first have Dr. Khoo Eng Tat. Is a senior lecturer from the Engineering Design and Innovation Center, National University of Singapore, to give us a talk on how these technologies, mixed reality, augmented, virtual, can be used for medical simulation and training. Dr. Khoo, please.
Thanks, Kenway. Let me just load my screen. Hi, everyone. I'm Eng Tat from National University of Singapore, and my talk is on Metaverse, crossing the bridge between realities for medical simulation and training. You can see here in the image, this is me in different version of reality, and the image in the middle, that's version 1 of the HoloLens, and on the right, that is the industry-grade mixed reality device by Dakri. Quick background on myself, I did a PhD in mixed reality lab. And many years ago, I mean, this is in the 2000s, I think mixed reality is often the term that is discussed mainly among researchers in academics. I'm glad that today is a widely used terms and we are embracing it as a technology that could transform medical training and healthcare. Right, I'm a senior lecturer at the engineering faculty in NUS, and I also lead the Immersive Reality Lab, and founding member of the Holomedicine Association, and also a board director of Asia VR Association. And before this, I was a R&D director and co-founder of AR VR companies where we have developed training solutions, simulations for oil and gas and aviation. This is a bit of about our lab, right? We develop virtual, augmented, and mixed reality simulations. We develop trackers, custom trackers, wearables to make the simulation and training a lot more realistic. We have the pleasure of collaborating with many of our colleagues in NUS School of Medicine and NUHS, which is the hospital within the university. And I think today is very interesting how virtual and reality are kind of coming together, are converging, right? This is the continuum that is describing the reality and the virtuality, right? And on the two extreme, I guess we have seen examples from the games like VR games and also augmented reality games like Pokemon, right? On these two extreme reality. But I think what is exciting is that how virtual reality is getting a lot more realistic as well. Whereas in the picture in the middle, where is augmented virtuality, right? Where we can actually interact with objects and perform tasks in the virtual environment as close to as real, because we can interact with real objects in this virtual environment, like through use of a gesture, or through use of gloves and all these devices. We are able to create that seamlessness between the reality and the and also the virtual environment. At the same time, with the mixed reality devices, we are able to create mixed reality experience that we can overlay digital information directly into the actual environment. Like for example, in this case, on the image on the left here, we can overlay a virtual patient in the actual clinics or in just a lab itself, right? We able to virtual patient, and we can perform interactions and perform diagnosis or procedures on this virtual patient. And I guess the convergence of this VR, virtual reality, augmented reality, and MR, mixed reality, is very exciting. And it's often a term that I guess today is popularly used, like metaverse. And this is where I think it would kind of help to propel the training in medical education through use of virtual reality, mixed reality, and also desktop and mobile learning platform. In my talk, I would share a few, I will share a high-level overview of some of the projects we have developed in collaboration with our colleagues at the medical school and the hospital, right? Ranging from robotic surgery, childbirth, AI simulated patient to ultrasound overlay, right? And these are all using virtual and mixed reality simulations. We are now looking into developing the different version of it, targeting the virtual reality and also mixed reality. This project started off with we have a collaborator as a robotic surgeon that looks into how we could use a simulator to train the residents in terms of performing soft tissue shearing. And we understand this is a challenging task, and the surgeons have, the residents have limited exposures to actually practice the procedure in actual clinical setting, right? So we look into the actual Da Vinci robotic machine, and we created a kind of 3D. We 3D printed the control surface, and then we mounted using a robotic arm, small robotic arm, and we put that into a simulations that allow us to look into simulating soft tissue pulling, soft tissue cutting or shearing, right? If I can share a video of how it looks like. You can see here we can simulate the dynamics of pulling the tissues. We use simulations of different parameters, like a spring network that can simulate the tenseness of the density of the tissues, and we can pull it, and we can allow the trainees to be trained on how to do the actions like tissue shearing. Yeah, this another project we have with the ONG department is on developing simulators for training medical students. This is during the ONG posting, right? This will complement the current medical mannequin training, right? We have developed 3 birthing delivery scenarios on stage 2 normal vaginal delivery, stage 3 placenta delivery, and also the dystocia complication. And we have done the study with the medical students, and overwhelmingly, many of them reported simulation is realistic, and it helped them in understanding the procedure of birth delivery. It's able to give them the context and also the guidance in terms of the hand manual in this procedure itself. I will just share. I'll skip the simulation part, but I'll just focus on how we have used the virtual hand guide as a way of guiding the user, the trainee, to kind of perform certain maneuver in the birth delivery. And this is the case on the right. You can see here the trainee is wearing a glove that will detect the hand positions, and is aligned with the intended position. You'll be shown in green, but otherwise you'll be red. So they have to really follow the steps. And we have a interface that look into allow the students to log in and review their performance, what they have done in this training itself. And similarly for the instructors as well, for the professors or the lecturer, they are able to log in as well to also see what statistics, what the students have done in the training. Right. Yeah, another project that we are looking into developing simulations for basic cardiac life support training. I mean, we understand that BCIS training is very intensive. It requires a need of instructors, right, and mannequins, very elaborate setup. But we are looking into creating a standalone device using whether it's using the VR or using the MR device, that actually able to detect their interaction with the mannequin, right? And we have created a version using a VR. It can shown here. Right, you can see, and the user studies we have shown that many users rated very positive experience using this new method of training, right? And we are currently developing smart mannequin that is stripped down the version of the mannequin, just using the smart spring and also sensors that they can detect the compressions for the CPR. You can see in this virtual environment, where the users are performing the CPR in virtual environment, it can actually detect that the compression rate, compression count, and also the rate. And more importantly is that all these user training data are being collected and they are actually provided feedback in real time to the user, right? You can see here the suspensory recoil, the compression rates, all these are presented to the trainee itself. Yeah, I think in healthcare simulations, we understand simulated patients are used in training the medical students. And we have looked into using AI, simulated patient in both virtual and mixed reality environment. And this is using a natural voice-based natural language processing that allows the trainee, the students to just talk to the virtual patient just using the voice, right? And we use the script from the training script from the that they use to train the virtual actors to actually train the AI. And it allows the student to be able to interact. In this case, we have piloted a trial with the orthopedic on history taking and physical examination. We are currently also doing a study on a pediatric training. Just going to show a quick one on how.
Good morning.
Morning, doctor. May I sit?
Please take a seat.
Okay, thanks.
What brings you here today?
I've been having really bad backache and pain through my leg recently when I work. My leg has been like this for 6 months. It started back when I was working and gotten worse since.
Can you tell me the location of the pain on your leg?
Yes, the pain is always at the outer right of my leg.
Andy, what do you work as?
I work as a cleaner in a shopping center.
Let's move on to a physical examination.
You can see from this video, the user here is able to interact and just talk to a virtual patient and carry out the clinical assessment. At the same time, to also perform physical examinations on the patient. Right. Another project we have with the ophthalmology department is to look into how we can use mixed reality to also do a papillary examination, right? And we are able to simulate, bring in this AI patient in the lab environment or in the clinics, and users are able to pick up the tools to actually perform the examination itself. This is still an early project. We are still very much looking into the proof of concept. You can see that you can pick up the light pen, you can shine onto the eyes and can perform the examination, right? And this is done in the lab setting where there's no patient, but we are actually able to simulate a virtual patient there. Right. Yeah, I'll share another project that we are working on the using mixed reality ultrasound overlay. And we understand that ultrasound is used in many clinical cases, right? But ultrasound could be kind of challenging to interpret, and for some of those who are not so experienced. So we are looking into how we can use mixed reality to enhance clinical interpretation of ultrasound scans by looking into 3D volumetric rendering and positioning. So we are constructing the 3D volume from the 2D scans sweep of the ultrasound, right? We will then do accurate image projections and reconstructions onto the model, and then overlay onto the anatomy of the patient itself, right? So you can see here on the bottom on the right, this is techniques that we have developed using fiducial marker that we put it on top of the probe itself, the ultrasound probe. And this is where we can use HoloLens to track the position and the orientation of this probe. and then reconstruct the scans of the ultrasound, and then overlay that directly onto the patient itself. Right. In the future, we are also looking into auto segmentation of the structure with area of interest, and also tissue density and content analysis. Yep, we have done I think accuracy is one of the very important factor in terms of medical simulations and training. So for us, we take that seriously. We want to know how accurate this tracking. So we have performed a test using HoloLens with 3 markers that we actually use a robotic arm. This is a high precision robotic arm that move the markers in a space, and then we captures the accuracy of it. And the mean errors that we have tabulated is actually 0.1 nm, which is highly accurate for most clinical practice. And this is a kind of example of the use case of the ultrasound overlay. And you can see here, this on the right hand on the screen, this is the typical arrangement where whenever there's a scan, the image will be seen on the screen. But now with the use of mixed reality, we are able to overlay the scan directly onto the patient itself. Yeah, so the user is wearing the HoloLens 2, and then is able to then, when you're doing the sweep, be able to directly see the overlay into the patient itself. Yeah. All right, with that, I come to the end of my talk. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Khoo, for sharing your extensive experience in applying these XR technologies to medical training and simulation. Next, I'd like to invite Prof. Alfred Kao, Assistant Dean of Education at Yong Loo School of Medicine, Head of Division of Hepatobiliary Surgery at NUH, to talk about how mixed reality is being adopted right now in medical education and training.
Morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this inaugural Holomedicine Association Summit. I've been tasked to talk about the medical education and training and how this can be assimilated into the future of future training for healthcare professionals. So the title of my talk today is Revolutionizing Medical Education and Training with Mixed Reality Technology Using HoloLens, the Way Forward. On top of being a liver surgeon and the head of the division of the hepatobiliary surgery, I'm also wearing another hat, which is the Assistant Dean of Education at the School of Medicine in NUS, where we actively now looking at how technology can be incorporated into medical education. Medical education training really is at a crossroad now. Previously, we have all the very conventional way of teaching, but with the active development of technologies coming into not only in healthcare, but in many sectors, we can't run away from thinking about how this will then change the way how we train our future healthcare professionals. I think certainly this has been proven to be a real issue in the recent pandemic, and we are still in the middle of that, where the educational institutions are being forced to rapidly evolve, particularly using technology to focus on meeting the challenge of maintaining quality education, and at the same time exploring new and innovative methods to move forward. And certainly with the fourth industrial revolution with big data, AI, machine learning, it's set to transform healthcare and certainly education as well. It's suffice to say that I think our younger generations are now the internet generation, where they're very well versed in technology. The learners coming into the medical schools now in the NUS, for example, are born after the year 2000, where I think handphones and medical devices, or rather electronic devices, are part and parcel of their life. And more importantly, I think we also need to look forward to understand how they learn. The learning gaps, for example, in this case, in big groups, lectures and things like that, certainly I think the take home is probably much lower now. And the interest of the student learning in big groups and sitting in the lecture hall for hours and hours of sessions are probably not going to be so useful anymore. And more importantly, in medical training, there's a lot of variation in exposure, not only on the core knowledge where we can deliver in big groups, but also in the experience of some of the students, where we need to look for ways to uniform uniformly expose them to the curriculum in certain parts of the skills. Sometimes the content can be also very dry, and using technology can then harness on the interactivity of it, where we then can focus on specific learning encounters that we will share with you some examples. Certainly, I think with the rise of the AI and big data, machine and deep learning, how do we then incorporate this into medical education? I think this is something that people are very concerned about. What is actively being developed in the healthcare setting where people are using this now in clinical practice more and more. There's call to try to ensure that the ethical practice of that is seriously looked into to make sure that we don't compromise patient care. And I believe the robot will not be so, because the machine actually will certainly require the human being to build the algorithm behind that. I think to be able to incorporate AI into the medical education, we need the teacher to really actively think of the role and adopt that. And the result of AI in machine and education is not to replace the doctor and the educator, but it's really to replace and enhance many of the doctors and the teachers' role, to then grow them into a new role that can focus on more the humanistic and the human factor part of the healthcare training. Importantly, I think in the 1980s, Arthur Clarke said that any teacher who can be replaced by a machine should be. In fact, I think if we just think of the teacher as someone who transfers knowledge, then certainly a machine can do a better job. But if you can have good teaching, actually involves in reality using the information from many resources, collating them, prioritizing them, adapting them, and then using it in a focused manner to drive home the learning message for the students. And therefore, I think it is some of these things are really not able to achieve by the computer at this point in time. The teacher has an important role to therefore curate the information. And even if we truly want to introduce artificial intelligence in medical education, the teacher plays a role in driving the learning content as well as the outcomes that they want. Also important to understand that while AI will undoubtedly impact medical education in many forms, in the form of intelligent tutoring, adaptable virtual facilitators, data mining, so on and so forth, it will affect the education at the overall in the future. But we should see this as a way to help us grow and maintain competency and develop a good core groups of good and competent doctors in the future. So there are major areas that we need to think about when we want to introduce AI in medical education. Firstly is to being proactive in the AI system design, because without being involved in the process, your output from there will certainly be something that may become undesirable. Also, we need to work closely with the AI diagnostic system, communicating with the system, also consider deep counseling and related activities, and teaching new medical AI, consider the role of robotics as well as e-patients. I'm just going to touch on some of these points. What do I mean by working with AI diagnostic system? And in fact, this is written very nicely in the Association of Medical Education in Europe, where they look at now what is the role of AI in medical education, and say that the doctors need to know how to constructively build the AI diagnostic tool. And if we are talking about the doctors needing to use this in the future, I think it is extremely important to start the training now for the students, because the students not only learning now, but only start to be exposed and learn this when they are at work in the future. I think it may potentially open up a potential pitfalls of compromising safety, or rather even require longer time for them to achieve competency in that. But in that process, I think other than technical training, it's important for us to consider the wider question about the ethics, the roles, the protocol, and liability that needs to be addressed. Also, we need to make sure that our students and the doctors need to be able to learn how to communicate with the system. And this is an iterative process. Certainly, the machine learns by communication and input of the information more and more. And as we are building now, for example, in our health system, Singapore is moving into a new medical record system. I think it's important for us to make sure that this information that's put in to facilitate healthcare now is actively looking at the system behind to ensure that the AI that can be used in the future does not compromise the relationship between the doctor and the patient, but rather provide an elevated relationship in a better way of analyzing the information, so on and so forth. Also, I think we need a core group of people who is able to now teach what is the role of medical AI in medical education. And I think we have some plans in place that I'll share with you what is done at the NUS School of Medicine. And we have learned from some past examples, for example, the IBS Watson, where they taught oncology skill through hypothetical cases. And certainly, I think human brains don't work like this. There's a lot more consideration other than taking into account the hypothetical case only. And as a result of that, I think it's extremely important to have a core group of people who has expertise from medical, education, computing fields to come together with the engineers as well, to then seriously look into all sectors and left no stone unturned to ensure that the future model of the AI is safe and useful. As I mentioned about the ethics, also we need to be mindful about the languages. Sometimes there's a lot of medical jargons and it may confuse the system into what we're talking about, and therefore standardizing the language and making the medical practitioners and students learn these new languages is an extremely element in this. We know about robots, and there's no way we will run away from using robots now. Robotic is going to become one of the mainstay of surgical intervention. Already minimally invasive technique using laparoscopy is really standard of care in many parts of different kinds of surgery, and certainly intelligent robot will come, and robots certainly merge very nicely with the AI software. And it's important for us to then train the machine to be able to do it accurately, to facilitate and enhance the way how we do surgery, but not to replace the role of the surgeon. So at the systematic level at the school, I would suggest a few strategies in introducing technology in medical education and training, and we have done so in the School of Medicine, taking the initial steps, but I think we are moving towards developing this more and more. What will be the challenges? As I mentioned, I think our main aim ultimately is really to produce the professional doctors that will be able to serve our patients in the future. But in this process now, we can't run away from thinking, how do we transform the information that's available in medical field to become knowledge? Because information does not equal to knowledge. It has to be processed and learned before it becomes knowledge. Also, how do we deal with the AI application, as I mentioned earlier? And more importantly, how to then still continue to preserve the sacrosanct relationship between doctors, the teachers, and the patients, as well as the student. There are many contents that a student need to learn in medical school. I think, while we say that it may be exciting to be medical and nursing students in the current age, because they get to learn all this through advanced technology, as well as learning the core competencies through training. But really, I think we are also at an explosion of medical information where there's too much information for them to learn. And how do they then use technology to make sure that the process is streamlined and enhanced and optimized. I think ultimately the aim of starting from having information, making them acquiring the knowledge and the skills, and this remains the ultimate outcomes that we want to achieve, a competent doctor. And we also need to understand that we're dealing with adult learners. Adult learners is different from secondary school or high school students or primary school students, where the learning is more likely to be enhanced if it is experiential, and it's just right time, right moment, right information. And technology certainly can do so, especially with AI on the background. And knowing that from the role of the early stage younger students, perhaps they're in the pedagogy phase where the student learn by listening to the teachers. Now, when they're moving into adult learning, there's a lot more information that is required back and forth between the teachers and the student. The teacher, in fact, is part and parcel in the level together with the students, and is more problem-centric than subject-centric. And to facilitate this, I think it's important to understand, if you were to introduce technology in medical education, what could potentially be the factors that may hinder or increase the enhanced ability of the teachers on the ground to start thinking about whether they want to adopt technology. I think firstly is to look at the technological factor, whether that particular technology is perceived to be useful or superior. Secondly, how easy is it for initial adoption, and also availability of that. More importantly, I think the trainer or the teachers themselves or the senior people in the school, the attitude towards the change, the capabilities of them in adapting this change, what is the pedagogical belief, and so on and so forth. And last but not least, I think we need the whole institution to be behind this process to make sure that the policies, the support, the funding, as well as the infrastructures are all built properly. And the strategy for educational transform via learning technologies, and particularly for today's purpose, we're talking about mixed reality. I'll show you some of the initial examples of how we introduce this, is to really have a clear strategic intent to foster participation from the whole school ground up, as well as top down with policies that we put in place to facilitate everything. And therefore, this requires a facilitative leadership. And last but not least, important to ensure that we build academic development in this process. So at the School of Medicine, we've taken a few key steps that I'll share with you. And firstly, I think is to ensure that our future generations of medical students and learn about healthcare informatics. And as of this year, a special pathway or module has been created under health informatics as shown here, where now there are core lectures regarding critical thinking of data and analysis of data being introduced through workshops, datathons, and projects. And in this particular segment in our students' learning, they are required to be able to explain the principles of healthcare information, how to apply them. They will have projects where they get to deal with now big data and learn how to analyze and make sense of the data after that. And also concurrently, I think well, our healthcare informatic teams together with, for example, Nyam, who is the leader in Datathon, coming together to allow our students to now learn about how to figure out the algorithm working in the AI on the background. And concurrently in the School of Medicine, we also have the education technology enterprise, where the committee now sets out to look at the initiation of innovative new technology that may be useful in medical education and training. This is particularly useful in the NUS School of Medicine because on the background, we also have the Holomedicine program in the health system where things that are developed there may be useful, that can be packaged for education. And we are looking not only at mixed reality as a technology, but all technologies across the board, from learning platforms to virtual reality to gamification, so on and so forth. And the ultimate aim is really to transform the way how healthcare education can be delivered, not only through streamlining of the curriculum, but is to ensure that the technology is built for the purpose of the appropriate citing within the education curriculum itself. And we're happy to introduce you to the committee where we now have a body that actually actively look at the available technology, reviewing what is available, also actively encourage in-house development of some of the projects. For example, we have the VIP project, virtual integrated patient, where our team from the VIP actually developed a chatbot that allows our students to now learn history taking, and at the same time, NUS Med2 Lab is actually also another chatbot that's allowing our students to learn about clinical reasoning. So our students actually go in, log in, and then play the role of the doctor. And then the patient, who is a chatbot, will then respond according to this using the AI. In virtual reality field, we also now have the training tools that train our students on patient safety as an interprofessional tool in the operating theatre. We have a few modules that's related to this, including the use of this in dentistry, surgery, anesthesia. And at the same time, we also have gamification, where we use games to teach our students on healthcare economics, where students basically go in to play the game, and through the game they can learn about when they order a certain investigation, how much will it cost, and when they order a wrong investigation, there may be additional unnecessary costs incurred to the hospital's bill. And the student will also learn about the funding system in the healthcare. So with this as a background, we have many other projects that are now being grown. For example, as I've shown in the PASIT project, where we use this to train our students in the operating theatre, particularly focusing on patient safety. This came quite timely and useful during COVID-19 because of the pandemic, where our students were not allowed to enter the operating theater. And so as a result of that, our students actually get to learn how to be a safe surgeon in the operating theater on the background of a multidisciplinary interprofessional training, where they now see what the dentist do before the surgery to get dental clearance, do a procedure safely for the patient before operation. Also allowing our students to now see what the anesthesia doctor do to ensure that it is safe before the patient is put under anesthesia during surgery. And also importantly, then they play the role of the surgeon. And we're happy to say that we've also grown this into an additional module for our nursing student in the Alice Lee School of Nursing to learn about patient safety training in the operating theater using the virtual reality platform. And so these are just the 4 modules that we have grown in this. Just skip the video because you probably have seen that a little bit already. And clearly, I think while I mentioned and repeatedly earlier, the need to grow some scholarly understanding into this. And by doing some studies related to this, we could show that actually some of these technological tools used in education were able to significantly improve the understanding of the students in specific areas, like in this case, their learning related to the patient safety, the specific objectives related to WHO patient safety guidelines. Also, their understanding using, for example, validated scores in the patient safety aptitude certainly has a significant improvement after the training. We also have other tools that's developed as interprofessional training. In this case was on mass casualty response, where we use virtual reality to train our medical students. But concurrently, as you would see here, actually we have a civil engineering tool where the civil engineers actually use this to teach civil engineering students about building of a bridge, in this case a civil structure, to use that tool to then immerse into a worksite environment and build the structure. And concurrently, when there's a fault that is built into the game or the system, now the whole structure collapse, there will be a need for us now to go in to do triaging and secure rescue process. And after the whole dust has been settled down, the colleagues from Department of Building and School of Design and Environment will come in to do the site inspection to see where the potential errors are, and then how to then do site evaluation and then do post-mortem of the situation using this. And this is one of the unique interprofessional, inter-faculty tools that we have developed within the university to teach our students. And certainly more projects are now being grown in, for example, in this case, the PAST-IT tool, which is patient safety now in endoscopy, which we are also actively developing. But what you will see now is that we are now jumping into the next level, which is the mixed reality project. And in the School of Medicine, we have Project Horizon, which represents the next generation medical education using mixed reality. And we have a wide spread of areas that we are interested to grow mixed reality in. For example, I'll show you the Project Polaris, which is coming to fruition now. We have the first model of that being used in medical training. Before we start the project, in fact, we had a workshop together with Microsoft to understand the ability of what HoloLens 2 can do. And with the existing project now, we are growing certainly into various things. And more importantly, I think this was quite nicely placed within NUHS and NUS, because on the background where there's clinical application, as I mentioned, under the NUHS Holomedicine program, we now also have the NUS Medicine Project Horizon, where we focus on medical training and education. So Project Horizon, Project Polaris is one of the components of Project Horizon, where we use this particular one to train core procedural skills, bedside procedures for medical students and nursing students. So basically, it is going to be using this tool, and just basically easier to show you on the example, where the manual of the procedural skills are now uploaded and transformed into the holographic manner. And our students now can use this to superimpose it on a mannequin where they learn about bedside procedural skills like IV cannulation, catheterization of male and female patient. And we have instructional videos that is placed together that coinciding with the training tool using this mixed reality. And concurrently, we also have other video simulation, animation, as well as 3D models inside this particular tool that is developed together with Microsoft to now enhance the learning of our students. And the next phase of this will be to build artificial intelligence and deep machine learning in this particular tool, where we are now able to then track the actual performance of the student. And with the actual performance, the student with immediate feedback, now the student can get instant feedback related to whether they're doing it correctly or wrongly on the procedure. And there will be analytics that can come up together with this as well to let them know how well they perform in the procedure. Now you can imagine this tool, if we develop further into something that is comprehensive with various levels of difficulty and with accuracy in tracking the performance, it can even be used as an assessment tool to address competency problem that we are currently using human teachers to assess whether the student is doing it competently. Now we can actually have the machine to help us do the first level of assessment. So how do we optimize the process? So on top of doing the procedural skills training, I think we are also now going to venture into doing now communication tools using this. I think you would have seen and heard from other speakers in today's meeting, basically sharing about what the future ways of training can be. And certainly mixed reality now can be used to convert clinical materials that we use to educate patient and family members now to package it such that our medical students or nursing students can also learn concurrently using the same platform, because it just requires connectivity on the device. More importantly, I think we can also create something that's very interesting, like what Dr. Koo has shared just now, the communication tools, the orthopedic VR tools that they can use for now, taking physical history, physical examination on the patients with limb as well as to eye examination. All this now can be built into clinical scenarios in a computer simulated manner or mixed reality to perform all sorts of training in terms of communication, surgical skills, because the beauty of HoloLens 2, or rather the mixed reality technology, is also not only on the computer vision, but also on the natural language processing. And it should not stop us from moving on to the next phase. In fact, we are doing that now for mixed reality under Project Mira, where we can take now real patients' materials like scans and stuff, convert them into the holographic manner that does not only is useful in teaching trainees, sharing in patient how the surgery is performed, but also we can use it for preoperative surgical planning. And certainly if the surgeon can use it for preoperative planning and enhance the way how surgery can be done, it can be packaged to medical education as well. Some of this information now has been trialed in our Department of Surgery at the National University of Singapore, where, for example, in this case, Yam together with Dr. Kao carried out a trial of using HoloLens and Microsoft Teams on computer. Some students on site in the operating theater is able to wear the HoloLens and see exactly what is being done during the operation. For example, in this video, where Yam is doing a hernia operation, and then during the operation, he can explain the steps of the operation, and concurrently, this can be beamed using the HoloLens directly into the Microsoft Teams connection, and the student who is sitting in the auditorium or at home on the computer, laptop, or desktop now can also join the session and listen to it actively. And concurrently, halfway through the surgery, for example, if you decided, okay, I want to share the anatomy of this part of the operation, and using the HoloLens going into the archive, we're now able to pull out the information real time to share with the students on screen to then see that, okay, this part of the operation is related to what I'm doing now, and you can have a real-time learning that is very much effective compared to hours of sitting in the lecture theater to learn about that. So you can see down, Yam actually go onto the archive and pull out the picture that show the anatomy of the groin to allow the student to understand what anatomy of the groin is about. And for preoperative planning, for example, we have also done that, and particularly in the Department of Surgery, Division of Hepatobiliary Surgery, we use this now to do liver anatomy surgical planning before the operation, where we can convert CT scan of the patient now into 3D holographic manner, where the patient's scan now can be seen clearly into various segments of the vasculature, relationship of the tumor and so on and so forth into the operation as well, right? And this certainly will enhance the way how we do training, not only for undergraduate and postgraduate training. You can see Dr. Kao here wearing the HoloLens now with the 3D reconstruction of our vessel. This is me standing behind. Now I can direct him to do the surgery together using the holographic projections of the images. For example, in this case, we actually have the 3D image of the holograms being superimposed onto the patient's real liver during the operation, during a keyhole surgery for resection of a liver tumor. As we have seen previously also, now we are one of the first in the world to use this particular holographic guided minimally invasive technique to do donor hepatectomy for live donor transplantation. So ultimately, I think whatever that is being developed in the clinical arena for medical training, medical use can be packaged in a way that can have educational value for medical students and nursing students. And this is important because while if we are going to use this to communicate with patients, we certainly can package this information and use it in medical training to complete the whole cycle of learning for everyone within the healthcare system. And ultimately, I think in artificial intelligence for machine learning, there are a few things that we're developing now, including what we are doing on the background in the university, where the students' data performance is now housed into the data lake under the OSET initiative. We are also looking at developing using HoloLens or mixed reality technology for various communication tools, procedural skills, teaching of clinical anatomy, as I mentioned. And on the background, there's also plan to now develop a learning management system with AI capabilities, such that we are able to track students' learning, as well as promptly advise them on their revision, track their longitudinal performance over time, to then give them instant feedback where their deficient areas are, because all this information are now available actually on various platforms in the school's databases. And I think this picture essentially shows us the various capabilities of the mixed reality technology and how each of our projects now will harness on the capabilities of this. And this slide, actually, I got it from Dr. Koo previously, where we discussed our projects, where how we can actually transform mixed reality in clinical practice into medical education tool, and they are seamless. In fact, therefore, the beauty of it in NUHS is that we have both housed under the same umbrella, where we now can have one journey to serve all purposes in all these directions. And certainly, we are able to then think about the areas that we can consider doing research in, not only in clinical use, but also in education use. This particular video is essentially just showing us how precise the anatomy can be seen now on the mixed reality technology using HoloLens. And really just for us to open up our imagination to think how else we can continue to enhance this particular view in the use of medical education and training. I'd like to probably end a few of my last few slides saying that I think precision learning in medicine is really coming now. And it's very important for us to really think how we can enhance the training of medicine of the future using precision learning. People talk about precision medicine with molecular level, using data to accurately dose, pick the diagnosis, and so on and so forth. But I think in education, we can also do that by having all the crucial data points being now fed into the AI system, who will then be able to analyze and show us precisely which patient is on which phase of learning, and then therefore produce the necessary intervention to help them to overcome the difficulties at the fastest possible using the computer algorithm. Ultimately, I think medicine and is still very much a business that involves human beings. We do not want the robots to really replace the doctors and the nurses and the healthcare professionals, but we want to preserve still really, I think, the sacrosanct doctor-patient teacher-student relationship. We don't want a machine to come and tell you, look, I think you're going to die because you are diagnosed with advanced cancer. I think the relationship between teachers and the students is really very, very secret. But as I mentioned much earlier, AI will not replace this relationship. AI will enhance what is the mundane part of the background things, and then will enhance the relationship further by taking away the potential hindrance that is in the system that is laborious and mundane. I think also in surgery, for example, you can see in the example that we're showing there, in the use of a precision mixed reality technology, we can now even enhance the way we guide our juniors doing surgery, and perhaps even enhance their learning curve in such a way that they can mount it much faster than previously. So final word, basically, I think we can't run away from digital transformation in medical education. We should have an open mind, and more importantly, I think we need to have faculty and leadership that become deeply involved in the process of educational transformation to meet the challenges of the 21st century. And to conclude, I think we want our future healthcare professionals to be ready to practice. And I think it's important for them to think about mixed reality, AI, machine learning as a crucial part of the future, not only in training, but in medical practice. With that, I thank you all for your attention. I'll be happy to take any question that come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Carl, for the very comprehensive review of how mixed reality can be applied to medical education. Now we have a second panel discussion. So it consists of Dr. Koo, Prof. Carl, and will be joined by Mr. Gary Stefano, who is the Associate Director of Customer Support Services at the University of Queensland. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining this panel. For the first question, someone from the audience has also asked this question. So in terms of trying to designate HoloLens as a formal component in the curriculum for training residents and fellows, are there any potential barriers of such as technical issues, technical deficiencies, lack of training, cultural barriers, ethical concerns, or liabilities? Maybe can we have Mr. Stefano share his thoughts first, and Prof. Carl, you can chime in afterwards.
Thank you for that. Yes, I think the technology factors that was in the previous slide is one of the hard ones to actually get medical engagement, to actually see the technology is useful. I think it's wonderful to see what's being achieved by yourselves. And I think being slightly different from the medical side, I come from the IT side. And one of those things is looking at those strategies and transformation, digital transformation, and how we're going to teach in the future, and actually make all our teaching spaces meet those requirements. I think that's difficult when you look at this technology, because a lot of people look at it to say, well, you can only do a one-on-one. It's only a small scale thing. It's not a big scale thing. But we've proved through our anatomy programs and different programs that you can actually teach into larger courses. But getting that momentum to go into other courses is very, very difficult. I think there's a lot of bureaucracy about IT coming in and trying to augment what is a discipline of such high level, where it normally our medicine programs would direct us, and bringing these technologies in there, they're very new. The medical programs don't find them easy to adopt, and you need a vision. You need that vision to actually say, and an academic buy-in to work those problems through. And we've been lucky with some of our academics and the company. The company is very important. So we work with VSI really closely. We have academic meetings with them. We have teaching and learning meetings with them to provide and facilitate changes in the product for teaching. When we initially had it, teaching wasn't its strength. But now there are several improvements in there that help us go to those larger courses. Our nursing program is probably one of our most advanced when it comes to using the Holomedicine apps. And like previously said, there's some very strong things in there in the collaboration space within 6 to 8 people. And once you get that momentum, and in that faculty, we do have the momentum, and it's being moved on into dentistry, into different facets of rehabilitation and things like that as well. But I do think the perceived usefulness and the sort of the politics behind it are definitely a blocker. They're very difficult to go through. And even though our Vice Chancellor, our Deputy Vice Chancellor academic, is very supportive. It's still hard to push through the deans and to get that kind of momentum. And it is transformational. If you look at it, it is transformational. And through COVID, it proved absolutely essential to get the students and give them that experience. And even through that, you see that, and it goes through, and it's still difficult to engage these people. It's really hard. We actually have our normal health systems in Australia. They are taking it to clinical disciplines and things like that. And our research areas, we're looking into the research side of this. The research areas are really interested because it's given them an insight, a picture of where they could never see before. But the medical program, still working on that one, with the exception of anatomy. And anatomy, quite unique in that sense, because their view is they're able to show things that would be very, very difficult in surgery. So there's a part of the eye, you would know that, where students find it very difficult to see, and they can now show these things. So that there's some very strong strengths with this. I was particularly interested in the tactile part. I'd love to talk more about that because that's a big piece of the puzzle that appears to be missing as far as I'm concerned. And also, I think Microsoft need to come a long way with their teams to actually get that 3D desktop experience to actually get to these cohorts a lot better as well. But yeah, I do think perceived usefulness and the sort of bureaucracy is probably the hardest bit that we have.
I can't agree more with you, Gary, on some of the challenges. But I think we're fortunate in the sense in the NUS as well as in the NUHS system, we have the support from the senior leadership with funding and resources being put in place to grow this area because of the potentials that we see in this. I would certainly agree with you that the initial steps are not easy because to get buy-in from the people on the ground who may not be very fond of having technology being incorporated into their training and so on and so forth, because ultimately I think this is a big step for them. Many of them does not even know how to deal with technology to start with. But I would say that while COVID being the biggest disruptor in our life now, it is an important catalyst actually, because in the School of Medicine, when we first were starting on the digital transformation, it was challenging, but everybody knows that they have no choice, but now need to think about using technology as part of the solution in the education mission. And together with that, with the strong support from the senior management, and of course myself, I'm Assistant Dean in Education where I handle curriculum as well as planning for using technology and so forth. It gives us a great opportunity to then push this forward, and a lot of people now are very open to adopting that. And the second biggest thing that came along nicely was the successful examples. So if you can have positive examples that is shown to people to say that, look, I think it works this way, let's not worry about it being replacing your role as a teacher, but more importantly, what you can do is to really enhance your way of how you do teaching and so on and so forth. Then with all these baby steps showing positive examples, and then more and more people start thinking about wanting to do that, you build up a whole ecosystem that is able to support the whole process. And last but not least, I think also important to think in the long-term plan how to be self-sufficient in this, because the initial investment in terms of the cost as well as development of not only the hardware and the software are something that is, we are fortunate in the sense we do get some resources from the school as well as the health system, but to build in the ability to sort of create some of these programs ourselves in the long term, working very closely like in Dr. Khoo's team, as well as within the health system, we build up engineers with the capability in this area to be able to then learn from the major software companies like Microsoft or work closely with VSI. And then we build this ecosystem that has medical educators, we have data scientists, we have teachers, we have clinicians, we have engineers all coming together and making sure that the whole thing will flourish, because lacking of any one of these components certainly will pull everything back in that sense. Yep.
I think you probably touched on that, the augmenting of teaching, not taking over a teaching has been very important. And the investment, I think, to try to get that investment initially is difficult.
It is.
But you do need to invest like you've done to actually get it across the line. So I keep my fingers crossed. We keep working. The CIO is very forward looking, and wants these technologies to support the digital transformation, the virtual workspaces, all these sort of things that are coming along that we've now got at the Queensland or University of Queensland. But this bit, I think it's great when we have forums like this that we can actually see how far other areas, other countries have come along that journey and how useful it can be, which is empowering in itself, which is great.
Can we? Yeah.
Yeah, right. Thanks for the discussion on this topic. Right now, I'd like to ask Dr. Khoo, right? So mixed reality, I mean, is relatively new, at least to the public, compared to concepts such as virtual or augmented reality. And you can see right now we are moving a bit towards using mixed reality in healthcare and medical training. Do you foresee that maybe in the future, mixed reality will improve to a extent where you replace AR and VR fully, or do you think that AR and VR have some inherent unique attributes that make them very well positioned at different use cases?
Thanks, Kenway. I think when we have a new technology, oftentimes we wanted to think whether would this replace another technology, right? But I guess Prof. Kao earlier have give a very comprehensive overview on how VR and MR are transforming education in NUS Medical School and NUHS, right? And also I think it will complement, right, the virtual reality and mixed reality in terms of all other technologies, so like AI. You will complement the education. Where if you look at virtual reality, I think this is where things could be simulated at a very immersively, right? Students, users can get into the environment, can really feel immersed, that they feel they are there. It's very low cost to replicate. It can learn anywhere. So that's some of the advantages of virtual reality. At the same time, I think what mixed reality would add on to that experience, because mixed reality would encompass what virtual reality could do, but it can bring in another element, which is the context, right? You can bring the context to the actual simulation itself, or data to the actual clinical setting, right? For example, bringing in the imaging data, the scans, and able to do that into the actual operation, as what Prof. Kao have shared earlier. I think those are really the context, and this make the whole learning, the whole operations a lot more seamless, right? And I think another key advantage is that it can also give real-time feedback to the user, whether it's the clinicians who is practicing or the students who are practicing. I think it can give the real-time feedback. And oftentimes, I think maybe another key things I realized that over the years of research in this area is that we look at VR, we look at MR more from the point of able to bring in simulations, bring in visualization data into the actual environment. And that's true. And I think that's how I think virtual reality, mixed reality is going to transform the whole clinical practice and medical training. But I think another very important point is that at the same time that it can actually bring in the data, it actually captures data as well. Because if you imagine clinicians are wearing the glasses, doing their jobs, I think that all these data are actually good data points, and it actually helps to train up the AI, right? And this is how the AI could be used for simulation later on. And that has created a very, very nice loop. And AI, I think, is a key puzzle to the whole unlocking of this VR, MR, and education. And I think if you look at all these complementary technologies into these settings, I think we can create an environment that truly can be very effective in terms of training the students, and at the same time to improve the clinical outcome as well.
Mr. Stefano or Prof. Kao, do you have any points to add regarding this?
No, I need to support that. The outcomes as measured from our teaching and innovation areas, our students get a lot from this side of it, from a different learning experience, from an engagement point of view. And we've actually improved outcomes because of that. And whether we're using the VR or we're using mixed reality, it's always a positive thing compared to a long time ago when VR was really quite poor. But now with mixed reality, yeah, the outcomes are good, and we're moving away. So, for example, like spreadsheets, lots of data, things like that, moving them in, and sort of gamification and things like that. We're moving into that, and it just the students love it. The students just think it's a great thing, and they get the learning experience. So it's not a novelty; it's a good thing. So yeah, I absolutely support that. Yeah.
So coming from an educationist perspective, I think it's important to emphasize on the point, and the technology is really just the technology. The key thing is really to find the correct place to house this, and not to grow something for the sake of growing a technology just because it's there. I think it's important to find out where the learning gaps are, potentially then think about how technology can fit nicely into that, build an ecosystem around that. At the same time, ensure that the technology is not the one and only one tool that is used in teaching, because that cannot be the case in medical training particularly. So it has to be triangulated nicely with a carefully planned curriculum with information that transform into knowledge, at the same time using the tool to enhance that learning experience. And then we continue to learn along the process, because the data is really the beauty of the using technology, is really the ease of having this data now being analyzed in a way that can make sense for us to improve it further and further. Yeah.
I think one of the other key things is the students driving this. So we have these the technology now in the library, so that we can actually give it to students and they can continue their studies. We find it particularly effective pre-study type environments. Yeah, so yeah, no, it's really good. And it's only a tool, it's only a help, it's only augments is absolutely key all the way through.
Yeah.
Right, thanks for the opinions. So, Prof. Kao, you mentioned that you can't take the human out of the education or of the training, right? But in terms of like educational tools being created with like mixed reality, I mean, broadly speaking, we can classify them into either like independent learning applications, where the student either takes it home and studies this single module themselves, or in a more collaborative environment with multiple students together, or with an instructor present teaching them live. What do you think mixed reality will bring to the table the most, right? Like which kind of teaching method will be more has more potential in a way? Yeah.
I think it's important to, again, come back to the notion to understand that the device is a device. We need to understand what it can do and how it works. Certainly in the School of Medicine, for example, we have shown you some examples of the areas that we're going to grow in. It can be used really in the most versatile manner, as long as it doesn't compromise patient safety, as well as on confidentiality. So even to the extent that if you can get patient to agree, for example, it can be during a teaching session where you are supposed to be only allowed in, let's say, COVID restriction, in the room, only 6 students who can be present. But you can have another 62 students who can be now staying at home, watching the screen where this thing is beamed into the screen, for example, or to use it in the most versatile manner during a ward round. If the clinician were to be wearing it and communicating with the patient, examining the patient with his approval and consent, that we can conduct a bedside tutorial with the patients present actually. Or even to the example that we've shown just now earlier, there's various level of interactivity. You can have, if you have limited devices that's available for a few students to beam in together using the HoloLens, the rest then can look it on the screen. So I think it's important not to limit ourselves in the way how we want to use this particular tool in teaching, but to really think outside the box, be flexible, work within the limited resources that we have. But of course, I mean, if resources are available, ultimately, I think our dream is that one student will carry one of these devices, just their learning tool anywhere they go to. Is it going to be at home, in school, or whatsoever? So that where possible, they'll just whip out just like a laptop or an iPad. This is one extra kit or tool that is with them, so that when it comes to that time, they need to use it, they just log on and do it. Yeah.
I actually think this is probably where the virtual reality type mixed reality comes in, because it's a cheaper entry point. and you still can get a good experience from home. So maybe that's a good way forward as well.
But my personal view of this is that I think all technologies have its place. Some bits where you don't really need the full real environment interaction, don't need so good of a computer vision and so on, we can create the virtual reality for that particular segment. And other things where you really need now a lot more interactivity, especially in the real environment, and then it has to be a longer session, because for VR, we know that the student can't stay on the goggles for too long. Anything longer than half an hour, I myself will definitely get giddy. So we want to be very focused on identifying the tool that is useful in certain parts, and yet the mixed reality technology where it is now immersive into the real environment and that you can use it for a longer period of time in another setting. So that's important process that the people planning the curriculum, the technology needs to be able to fully understand this. Yeah.
If I may just add to the discussion, I think it's exciting that we have this metaverse discussion going on. We are company rebranding the Meta, and we have different companies are all jumping on board, right? And recently there's also a kind of quite a few companies like Niantic just raised a 300 million investment to create the metaverse. So I think there's a lot of excitement in this space, and I think coming back to really what metaverse is, I mean, to kind of put a context to these discussions about virtual reality, mixed reality, and education, is that I think the whole idea is to create this seamless environment where we can bring in the digital information and real world and kind of blend it seamlessly, right? So in that sense, I think it's about understanding. I think I agree with the discussions here. It's about understanding, the various different technology platform, whether it's a VR, whether it's MR, whether it's mobile. I mean, we mustn't forget that most people are on mobile now, right? On your phones and all those things. So I think all these platforms create a seamless learning environment. So it's all about how do you blend in the right kind of components, and what's the intent and what need to be taught, right? How the users will actually get engaged in that kind of environment. So I think it's about understanding the different technology platform and how do we blend it together and then create this seamless metaverse for education, right? I think that would be very, very exciting, moving forward.
Right, so we have one more question. So just now we saw some, through your presentations, we saw some demonstrations on how procedural skills and things like history taking can be applications, can be put in applications for teaching purposes, right? But in medical education, like non-technical skills like communications or like ethics is very vital as well. How can Holomedicine help to train these skills? And because there are such different skill sets, right? What is some associated challenges for this kind of objectives?
Maybe I can take that. In fact, I think this is exactly one of the things that we are doing now in the pipeline, because in the School of Medicine, we have informed consent workshop and also training professionalism and things like that. And previously, I think these workshops were not so commonly conducted. Now what we're going to do is that we already have the standard script. In fact, it is currently in the model of simulated patient where you have a real fake actor that will be acting in front of you. So some of this now we can have it in various models, in the sense that the real patient encounter or experience can come in the form of a simulated patient or even in the real patient subsequently. But for the very beginners, where the student just about to learn about these skills and learning the concepts of that, we can then transform that into virtual reality or mixed reality, where we can use a script that is used into training the workshop now, converting into the software that can be used for communication skills training prior as an introduction to the actual session itself. And I think the student can then come back and revisit this using this particular tool on their own self-learning. And that's the beauty of the technology, because you can repeat it anytime, any place in a safe environment.
Mr. Stefano or Dr. Khoo, do you have any insights into this? But if not, there's another question from the audience. I think this is a follow-on from a previous question. It's asking, what is the future plan for Holomedicine Association to expand on this, trying to get MR into medical training? So we have Dr. Gao here, maybe he can take this question.
Thanks, Kenway. So to answer that question, one of the arms or one of the working groups for the association is the education working group. And what we aim to do with this is to gather all the educators as well as those working in the university faculties or hospital faculties, be it undergraduate or postgraduate training, and to brainstorm on how we can further apply the mixed reality or even extended reality technology into medical training, both at the undergraduate as well as postgraduate level. We are working at getting authors involved for a scoping review on the use of extended reality in medical training. And subsequently from there, we will identify areas where we can potentially work more on, put areas that we can improve on. And also, in line with the whole aim of the association is to really, propagate the use of this technology. And also, to answer a previous question, to see how we can actually provide funding or, monetary support to the hospitals, institutes, universities that may be trying to start their own program by linking them up with the relevant industry partners, linking up with the relevant authorities to really try and get things off the ground so that they can get the programs running on their side. Right. So once again, if you are looking at starting a program within your institute, do drop the secretariat an email and we will follow up with you, and then we will see how we can best support you from the association side. Thanks.
Hope that answers the question. So actually that comes, the panel has ended for this segment. Thank you, Prof. Kao, Dr. Khoo, and Mr. Stefano for the discussions. So we'd like to give Dr. Gao some time to give his closing remarks if there's no more questions from the audience. Thank you.
Thanks, Kenway. So I'd like to thank everyone for staying with us through the morning for our very first segment of our inaugural Holomedicine Association Summit. It has been a wonderful morning. We have heard many presentations from the various speakers. We have had two very exciting panel discussions where we address very pertinent issues as well as important issues in the world of extended reality, as well as data transformation and data sharing. Well, I'd like to thank all the speakers as well for spending time this morning to really educate the audience and share their perspective on the future of extended reality and mixed reality. And also, of course, to the organizers, both from Singapore as well as from the association itself in Belgium and Europe, for staying through the whole thing, especially those in Europe. It's, I think, 6 a.m. in the morning now for them. Right. So once again, thank you everyone for joining. And for those of you who have signed up for the European and American segments, we will see you all tonight at 8:30 p.m. Singapore time or Asia time. And for those who are interested in joining in for the Europe and America session as well, do drop the secretariat an email and we'll send you the Zoom links for tonight. All right. Thank you very much once again and have a good day. Bye-bye.